I am not in the largest family photo hanging in the middle of the living room. In that photo, my mother stands next to my younger sister Julia, both wearing identical pastel blue dresses. My father stands behind them, his hand resting proudly on Julia's shoulder. The picture was taken on the day my sister won second place in a school dance competition, an event my parents considered a great family triumph. I remember that day well. I had won an award of my own, first place in the statewide science research competition. But no one took a photo to capture that moment. No one remembered it. Julia has always been the pride of the family. Since childhood, I'd known I was different from the rest of my family. While Julia loved princess dresses and tea parties with her friends, I spent hours in the garage, assembling electronic models and reading books about quantum physics. My passion didn't lie in loud gatherings or shopping mall trips, but in formulas, experiments, and unanswered questions. I once thought that if I tried hard enough, my parents would see me. But I was wrong. "Anna, can you help Julia prepare her presentation? She needs to get a high grade this time." My parents never asked what I was working on or what I had accomplished. The only thing that mattered to them was how I could help Julia. From homework to science projects, everything I did well became the backdrop for my sister to shine. Once, I refused to help Julia cheat on a test, and the result was a week of tense silence that suffocated the house. My parents didn't yell or scold me, but the way they treated me, like I was invisible, hurt more than any words ever could. If it weren't for my grandparents, I'm not sure I would have had any confidence in myself at all. My grandfather Martin was the only one in the family who truly understood me. He had been a physicist before he retired, and perhaps it was he who passed on to me a love for science. Since I was little, he let me tinker with small experiment kits, taught me how to take apart clocks, and showed me how to create simple chemical reactions. "The world belongs to the curious, Anna," he used to say whenever I told him about my wild ideas. "Don't ever let anyone make you believe that curiosity is a bad thing." Weekend visits to my grandparents' house were the only times I felt like myself. We read science magazines together, discussed the latest research findings. No one there told me I was weird, and no one forced me to stop and do things a proper girl should do. But at home? At home I was nothing more than a useless decoration. The day I received my acceptance letter for a summer research program at one of the most prestigious universities in the country, I ran home, my heart pounding with excitement. I thought, this time, my parents would finally be proud of me. But as soon as I opened my mouth, my mother simply sighed, folding clothes into the drawer as she spoke in an indifferent tone. "Oh? Julia just got selected as the team captain for the school dance squad. I'm thinking of getting her a beautiful custom performance outfit." I stood frozen, feeling as if my joy had been squeezed out of my chest. They didn't even pretend to care. They didn't even bother to ask what my research program was about. My parents didn't hate me. They just didn't think I mattered. They never deliberately tried to hurt me, but their indifference cut deeper than any criticism ever could. If not for my grandparents, I might have believed I truly had no worth. But Grandpa Martin and Grandma Ellen never let me think that way. "You have a rare intellect, Anna," my grandmother told me one late afternoon as I scribbled notes into my journal. "Just because they don't see it, doesn't mean it isn't there." Her words were like a soft breeze in the storm inside me. I didn't need my parents to recognize my worth. I would prove it on my own. I just never expected that doing so would come at such a heavy price. I didn't realize what was happening right away. It started slowly, subtly, like a snake slithering through tall grass, making no sound. By the time I left home for college, I had grown used to my parents' indifference. I didn't expect warm hugs or heartfelt well wishes. I only hoped that at the very least, they wouldn't stop me from maintaining my bond with my grandparents. The only two people who truly believed in me. But I had underestimated their selfishness. At first I called my grandparents regularly. Each call lasted for hours, as I told them about my organic chemistry class, the experiments I was working on, and the new friends I had made in the research club. Grandma Martine always listened eagerly, occasionally chiming in with experienced suggestions. Grandma Ellen would laugh and tell me how proud she was. But then, one day I called them as usual, and no one picked up. At first I thought maybe they were busy or out. But the next day, and the day after that. Then a whole week passed. And the phone just kept ringing unanswered. I sent texts, no response. I left voicemails, no one replied. Worry started creeping into my mind. I called my mother and asked if something had happened. "Oh, they're probably just busy," she replied indifferently. "They're old. Sometimes they forget to charge their phone." That explanation didn't sit right with me, but I had no reason to suspect anything. Until a month passed with still no news. My gut told me something was wrong. I decided to go home for the weekend without telling anyone. When I arrived, I drove straight to my grandparents' house. My heart pounded as I rang the doorbell. I waited, but no one answered. The windows were shut tight, curtains drawn, the whole house was eerily silent. I knocked, but still, no response. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Turning around, I saw Julia standing there, arms crossed, her eyes gleaming with defiance. "What are you doing here?" Her voice was cold. Nothing like the innocent tone she always used around our parents. "What are you doing here?" I shot back. "Where are Grandpa and Grandma? Why haven't they been answering my calls?" Julia rolled her eyes, clearly uninterested in answering. "They're not here anymore." Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. "What?" I stammered. "Where did they go?" She shrugged. Her tone as indifferent as if she were discussing the weather. "Mom and Dad put them in a nursing home." I stood frozen, my mind blank. "What? Why didn't anyone tell me?" My fists clenched, my whole body trembling with anger. "Because you weren't here," Julia said flatly. "And honestly, no one wanted to tell you, Anna." I lost control. I don't remember how I ran back to my car, or how recklessly I drove to my parents' house. When I stormed inside, my mother was sitting at the dining table, calmly sipping tea as if nothing had happened. "What did you do?" I shouted, my fury ready to explode in my chest. "How could you send Grandpa and Grandma to a nursing home without telling me?" She didn't even flinch at my anger. She simply set her teacup down and looked at me with detached indifference. "Because they're old and need special care, Anna. Did you think they could take care of themselves forever? Do they have any health issues?" I demanded, my voice sharp. My mother looked me straight in the eye without blinking. "No." "Then why?" I pressed. My father walked into the room, arms crossed. "Because you disappointed them, Anna." It felt like the ground beneath me had just collapsed. "What?" "They tried calling you many times but you never answered," he continued. "You changed your phone number without telling them, you ignored them, and now you have the nerve to come back here and question us?" I couldn't breathe. "I never changed my number. I called them all the time, but no one ever picked up." My mother shrugged, a fake look of pity in her eyes. "Maybe you just misremembered. Either way, it's too late now. They don't want to see you anymore." Those words cut into me like a sharp blade. I don't remember how I left the house. I only remember sitting in my car, my hands trembling as they gripped the steering wheel, my breath coming in short gasps. They had taken away the only people in my life who truly cared about me. And I swore I would find out the truth. I couldn't sleep. All night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning with chaotic thoughts. My parents had lied. Julia had lied. They had cut off my communication with my grandparents, and worse, they had made them believe I was the one who had turned my back on them. I tried calling my grandparents' number dozens of times again, but all I got was the cold, empty ringing. No answer, no messages back. A deep sense of fear rose in my chest. What if they weren't at a nursing home? What if they were somewhere else, alone, abandoned, with no one to help them? 2 days later I received a call I was never prepared to answer. My mother. Her voice was empty, devoid of emotion, but the words she spoke sliced through me like a frozen blade. "Your grandfather passed away." The world around me suddenly stopped spinning. "What?" My voice barely made it out. He passed away this morning. The funeral will be at 2 p.m. on Friday. I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened, and every heartbeat pounded in my ears like a relentless drum. Why are you only telling me now? I tried to keep my voice steady, but the tremble was impossible to hide. My mother sighed, as if speaking to a stubborn child. We didn't think you'd care. I wanted to scream at her, to demand answers, to shatter the web of lies. But all I could do was clutch the phone tightly and make a silent promise to myself. I will be there. I won't let them take away my last chance to say goodbye. On Friday, I arrived at the church early. The clock in my car read 1:30 p.m. when I pulled up in front of St. Peter's Church. I stepped out, my heart heavy, but still clinging to a fragile hope. At the very least, I would get to see my grandfather one last time. To say goodbye before they could steal that from me too. But when I stepped inside the church, the first thing I noticed was it was empty. The polished wooden pews sat in silence. There were no mourners, no hushed whispers of condolence, no familiar scent of incense that lingered in the air during funeral services. I turned around and spotted an elderly man tidying up near the door. "Excuse me, is this where Martin Walker's funeral is being held?" I asked. The man looked at me, confused. "The funeral? Oh, you mean the service this morning? That ended a long time ago. Around 10 o'clock. It felt like I had been thrown into a void. "No, that can't be right. My family told me it was at 2 p.m. The man gave me a sympathetic look. "Miss, I'm sure. They had the service early in the morning, finished before noon. Some of his relatives even stood outside talking for quite a while afterward." I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. They had done it again. They had deliberately deceived me. My hands shook as I dialed my mother's number. She picked up immediately, as if she had been waiting. "Hello, dear? Are you on your way?" Her voice was sickeningly sweet, artificial. I gripped my phone tightly, feeling the ground crumble beneath me. "You told me it was at 2 p.m., I said, forcing the words out through clenched teeth. There was a brief pause, then my mother let out a small, amused chuckle, utterly unapologetic. "Oh? Did I? You must have misheard." "Don't lie to me," I screamed, my fury igniting like wildfire. "You did this to keep me out, to make everyone think I didn't care enough to say goodbye. Didn't you?" My mother didn't deny it. "Anna, don't make such a big deal out of this." Her voice turned cold. "Everyone saw that you weren't there. Besides, it doesn't matter anymore." Doesn't matter? They had stolen my last chance to say goodbye to the only person who ever truly believed in me, and now they said it didn't matter? Before I could respond, I heard Julia's voice behind my mother. Syrupy sweet, like poisoned candy. "Oh, poor dear sister," she mocked. "Who would have thought you'd be so ungrateful, skipping your own grandfather's funeral?" I gripped my phone tightly. They hadn't just lied to me. They were rewriting the story, turning me into the heartless granddaughter, the one the whole family would look down on. I hung up. There was no reason to keep listening to their lies. There was nothing tying me to them anymore. They had cut me off from the family. I would find out the truth. I couldn't let this end the way they wanted. After hanging up, I sat still in the driver's seat, my hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to keep the rising fury from consuming me. They had deceived me. They had stolen my last chance to say goodbye to my grandfather. I took a deep breath, started the engine, and drove straight to the one place that could give me answers. My grandparents' house. My grandparents' home hadn't changed much since the last time I was there. Grandma Ellen's rosebushes still bloomed in the late afternoon sun, and the wind gently rattled the chimes hanging on the porch. I climbed the steps, my heart pounding. If she was truly in a nursing home like they claimed, then who was taking care of this house? I knocked on the door. Silence. Then, slow footsteps echoed from inside. The door creaked open. And standing before me was none other than Grandma Ellen. I froze. My eyes locked onto her, searching for any signs of illness or frailty, but she looked just as healthy as the last time I saw her. The wrinkles on her face had deepened slightly, but her eyes were still sharp, still full of clarity. "Anna?" Her voice trembled, as if she couldn't believe I was standing in front of her. Tears welled in my eyes. "Grandma, they told me you were in a nursing home." Her face darkened. She reached out, gently pulling me inside before shutting the door behind us, as if afraid someone might be listening. "We have a lot to talk about, Anna." She led me into the living room, where everything remained just as I remembered. The old science magazines my grandfather used to read were still neatly stacked on the bookshelf. Grandma sat down in her chair, her expression somber, as if carefully choosing her words. "They told me you didn't want to see me anymore," she said quietly. "That you were ashamed of us. That you changed your phone number to cut off contact." I shook my head, anger tightening around my throat. "No, you have to believe me, I never changed my number. I called dozens of times, but no one ever answered." Grandma sighed, her face etched with sorrow. "I know, Anna, I know you would never do that." She reached out, taking my hand and squeezing it gently. "But now, it's time to expose the truth." Grandma Ellen stood up, walked to the bookshelf, opened a hidden drawer, and pulled out a stack of documents. "The will of your grandfather," Grandma said, her eyes gleaming with determination. "We need to call the whole family together. We will make them face the consequences of what they've done to you, Anna." 1 week later, at my grandparents' house. I sat still in my chair, my heart pounding as I heard the sound of cars pulling up outside. My parents arrived first, walking in with the same casual expressions as if this were just another family gathering. My mother glanced around the room, her gaze passing over me like I was nothing more than a shadow. My father stood next to her, arms crossed over his chest. Julia followed right behind them, wearing her usual fake smile. She plopped down in the seat across from me, scrolling through her phone, pretending not to care. Then, Grandpa's lawyer Patrick Reynolds entered, carrying a briefcase. Grandma Ellen cleared her throat, her sharp eyes scanning the room. "Today we will be hearing the reading of Martin Walker's will." The room fell into complete silence. The lawyer opened his briefcase, pulled out a set of documents and began to read. First, Grandpa left this house to Grandma Ellen, along with a large financial sum to ensure she would never have to worry about money. No one reacted. That was expected. But when Mr. Reynolds moved on to the next section, the tension in the room thickened. "All ownership of Walker Science Lab, including all equipment and associated investments, shall be transferred to my granddaughter, Anna Walker." Silence. My mother's eyes widened in shock. My father clenched his fists. "Julia." Julia went rigid, her face twisting in disbelief. "What?" Julia shot up from her seat, nearly screaming. "No way! That was supposed to be mine." "Sit down, Julia," Grandma said sternly. But Julia didn't listen. She turned to our parents, her voice shrill with desperation. "You told me. You said if I played the role of the good granddaughter, if I pretended to care about them, I would get everything. How did this happen?" My parents stayed silent, their discomfort impossible to hide. The lawyer continued reading. "The remaining assets will be divided equally between Anna Walker and Julia Walker." But Julia no longer cared about the money. She wanted everything. "I won't accept this," she screamed. "Anna doesn't even want that stupid lab. I'm the one who deserves it." I stood up, locking eyes with Julia. "No, Julia," I said, my voice steady. "I am the one who deserves it." Everything was clear now. Grandpa had never forgotten me. And I would not let anyone take away what was rightfully mine. The room was suffocating with tension. My eyes remained fixed on Julia. Her rage boiled over, her hands clenched into fists at her sides, her face contorted with fury. I had never seen her this out of control, but deep down, I wasn't surprised. She had always believed she would get everything. "No!" Julia shrieked, her voice cracking with madness. "No way! That lab is mine!" She spun toward our parents, her eyes burning red with anger. You promised, you said as long as I followed the plan, as long as I played the role of the sweet granddaughter, cried in front of everyone, I would get everything, and now I'm supposed to accept just some tiny portion? No! I won't accept this. Her words sliced through the air like a blade, tearing apart the facade my parents had tried so hard to maintain. My mother took a deep breath, regaining her composure, but her eyes flickered with panic. Julia, enough, she snapped, but her voice lacked the firmness it once held. This is not the time to discuss this. Not the time? Julia let out a bitter laugh. You both told me that if I stuck to the plan, if I pretended to be a loving granddaughter, if I shed a few tears at the right moments, I would get everything. And now I'm supposed to settle for a measly split? No! I won't accept this. I stared at her, silent. Everything was out in the open now. I no longer had any doubts. My parents had never intended to be fair. They hadn't just favored Julia, they had groomed her into the greedy, entitled person she had become. My father, now out of patience, spoke in a gruff, unfriendly tone, no longer pretending to be diplomatic. Anna, you heard Julia. If you truly care about this family, you should understand that you don't need that lab. Julia needs it more than you do. I felt as if a bucket of ice water had been poured over me. I let out a short, humorless laugh, unable to believe what I was hearing. I don't need it? I repeated, my voice laced with disbelief. You mean, I should just hand it over to Julia? That's right, my mother interjected, her voice coated with artificial sweetness. Family is about sacrifice. Julia has always wanted a stable career, and you already have your own accomplishments. Why can't you share with your sister? My blood boiled. Share? I spat. Share like how you've always taken everything from me to give to Julia? Like how you cut me off from my grandparents, made Grandpa think I abandoned him? Both my parents stiffened. But Julia wasn't finished. She glared at me, pure hatred in her eyes. You don't deserve this, she screamed. You're just a pathetic bookworm, you have no friends, no life, all you do is bury yourself in those stupid experiments, while Enough. Grandma Ellen's voice rang out, strong and commanding, cutting through the chaos in the room. Both Julia and my parents fell silent. She stood up, holding an old letter in her hands, her eyes filled with deep disappointment. Do you know what this is? She asked, her voice slow but filled with authority. This is the last letter Martin left for me. About all of you. My parents paled. She unfolded the letter and began reading, her voice shaking with anger. My dearest Ellen. If you are reading this, then I am no longer here. I am writing this because I want you to know. I never trusted the kindness of our son and daughter-in-law. They have turned Julia into a greedy, selfish person, and they have deliberately stripped Anna of every opportunity. Grandma's eyes darkened, and her voice sharpened. I am leaving the laboratory to Anna because she deserves it, not because she is the favored child, but because she has always worked hard, always fought for herself, while the others have only sought to take advantage and destroy. If they ever try to steal what belongs to Anna, cast them out of her life. The room fell into a suffocating silence. Grandma folded the letter, her gaze piercing through each of them. And now, I will do exactly as Martin wanted. She pointed to the door. All of you, get out of my house, right now. My mother's mouth opened, as if she wanted to protest, but no words came out. My father stood up, fists clenched, but he didn't dare to argue. Julia let out an enraged scream. You can't do this to me. I can, and I will, Grandma snapped. I only regret that Martin left you anything at all. My parents dragged Julia toward the door, even as she thrashed and screamed. When the door slammed shut behind them, a weight lifted from my chest. At last, I had reclaimed what was mine. No one could take my dreams away from me anymore. Grandpa's laboratory had always been a place I only dared to dream of. Situated on a vast stretch of land outside the city, the modern building stood with its transparent glass walls gleaming in the morning sunlight, like a jewel nestled in nature. I stood before the grand glass doors, my hand trembling as I reached out to touch the small plaque mounted on them. Walker Science Lab, where science leads the future. Grandpa's name was still there, but now, it belonged to me, too. I stepped inside. Everything remained exactly as he had left it: the neatly arranged lab benches, the meticulously stored equipment, the faint scent of chemicals lingering in the air. I took a deep breath. This was the future I deserved, no longer suppressed, no longer forced into the shadows of others. Everything was mine, now. The following months were busy, yet profoundly meaningful. I threw myself into my work with an intensity I had never felt before. The renewable energy research projects that Grandpa and I had once discussed were now becoming reality under my hands. The lab staff, those who had once respected Grandpa, quickly welcomed me with surprise and admiration. They no longer saw me as just Martin Walker's unknown granddaughter. They saw me as a scientist in my own right. Someone capable of continuing his legacy. Every day I felt his presence. In the handwritten notes he left behind. In every complex equation I solved, remembering the countless times he had patiently sat beside me, helping me untangle each problem, one step at a time. And every time I look up at the photo of Grandpa and me hanging on my office wall, me as a child, wearing oversized safety goggles, holding a test tube with a beaming smile, while he stood beside me, his eyes filled with pride, I carry that moment with me. A reminder that family isn't about shared blood, but about those who believe in and love us unconditionally. Grandma Ellen never left my side. Despite her age, she still visited the lab often, bringing warm, freshly baked pastries and words of encouragement. I signed up for an online science course, she said one afternoon while I was analyzing a test sample. I want to understand more about what you're doing. I laughed, looking at her with fondness. You don't have to do that, Grandma. I just need you to be here. She patted my hand gently, her eyes filled with unwavering determination. I want to be a part of your world, Anna, and your grandfather would be so proud. I squeezed her hand, saying nothing. Some moments don't need words. Just the presence of those who truly love you is enough. My family tried to contact me afterward. At first, there were sweet messages from my mother, pretending as if nothing had happened. Anna, how have you been? Your father and I miss you so much. Maybe we should meet and talk? Then came the pleading. Sweetheart, Julia still hasn't been able to accept this. Do you really need that lab? Please, think about the family. And when I didn't respond, their words turned sharp and venomous. You ungrateful brat, this family has sacrificed so much for you and you cut us off over a bunch of useless lab equipment? I didn't reply. I didn't need to. They had chosen their path, and I had chosen mine. 1 year after Grandpa's passing, Walker Science Lab was officially recognized as a leading research center in clean energy technology. I stood on the stage at the anniversary celebration, looking out into the audience. There, in the front row, was Grandma Ellen, her eyes glowing with pride. I took a deep breath, holding the microphone, my voice steady and clear. I want to dedicate this achievement to someone special. Someone who believed in me, even when the world turned its back. Someone who taught me that knowledge is power, and perseverance is the greatest weapon. My grandfather, Martin Walker. The applause thundered through the hall. I inhaled deeply, my chest swelling with pride. I had lost so much. But in the end, I had gained everything that truly mattered. Freedom, dreams, and a real family. And I knew, even though he was no longer here, Grandpa was smiling. Anna's story is not just a tale of family favoritism and betrayal. It's a powerful journey of reclaiming self-worth. It highlights a sad reality: not everyone is fortunate enough to have a family that truly loves and supports them. But more importantly, it reminds us that true family is not defined by blood, but by those who believe in and cherish us unconditionally. Sometimes, to find freedom and success, we have to walk away from toxic relationships and build our own path. How did Anna's story make you feel? Have you ever experienced family favoritism, or had something rightfully yours taken away? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more meaningful stories about family and life. No one ever told me that marrying into a wealthy family wasn't just about money. It was an endless battle to be acknowledged. And no one said that, even if you love your husband with all your heart, you can still be torn apart by the scorn in his mother's eyes. I lived through it, day after day, meal after meal, every cold glance behind her perfect makeup. I used to think, if I worked hard enough, if I loved enough, they would accept me. But they didn't. And I knew that, clearly, painfully, on the 8th Thanksgiving since I entered that house. My name is Camila Reyes, 34 years old, owner of the Butter and Grace Bakery in Portland's Old Town, Maine. I come from a working-class family. My mother was a seamstress and my father died in a factory accident when I was 9. We lived in a tiny attic apartment, where in winter the wind howled through the walls, and in summer it got so hot you could bake bread on the windowsill. It was in that old kitchen that my journey with flour and sugar began, not out of dreams, but out of survival. With a full scholarship, I attended Les Miel Culinary School in Boston, and then was hired by the fine dining restaurant Linden Estate, where I spent 7 years, mastering every technique, every rigid rule of haute cuisine. Eventually, I returned to Portland and opened my own little bakery, where every pastry carries a memory from my hard-knock past. My husband, Aaron Whitmore, 38, serves as senior business director at the real estate firm Whitmore & Crane. We met at an art fundraiser for the local hospital. I still remember when he walked up to the dessert table and asked, "Do you have the recipe for this almond tart?" I jokingly replied, "Only if you've got a recipe to calm my nerves." That's where it all started. We fell in love, got married 2 years later, and now have an 8-year-old son named Ethan. Ethan is smart, sensitive, and has his father's eyes. Bright, calm, and full of questions about the world. He loves helping me mix dough, always saying one day we'll open a shop called Butter and Ethan. On weekend mornings, while Aaron's still asleep, Ethan and I wake early to prepare cookies for early orders. His laughter in the kitchen feels like sunshine in winter. We're not rich by high society standards, but we're not lacking either. After 4 years, my bakery has earned a solid place in Portland, once featured in the What to Eat Today section of Maine Weekly. Aaron consistently ranks among the company's top revenue contributors, and is often invited to speak at national real estate conferences. But to Margaret Whitmore, my mother-in-law, none of that means anything. To her, I'll always be that girl who brewed coffee in the South Side slums, though I've never been a barista. Since the wedding, she has never once called me by name, just her. At Whitmore family galas, she introduces me as Aaron's wife, the baker. I hear the way she emphasizes baker, as if it's a job unworthy of mention among CEOs and attorneys. And Ethan? She's never attended his birthday, never hugged him, never once offered praise. She buys gifts for her other grandchildren. Bikes, Apple Watches, even ski trips to Aspen. Ethan? A $4 box of crayons with a note. Enjoy. I've asked Aaron many times if he felt it was unfair how his own child was treated like a stranger. He would usually go quiet, then sigh. I know, but she's my mom, and she, doesn't change easily. I understand. But understanding doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. I don't need gifts or compliments. I just want Ethan to grow up without feeling rejected, just because his mother wasn't born refined enough. Every time I look at my son, I make a silent vow that even if I have to stand against the world, I will shield him from the Whitmore family's cold gaze. I wasn't born to be a socialite. I was born to be a mother. And I'll do that. With all my heart, with every scent of sweet pastry, and with every tear I shed, silently in the kitchen. Ethan stood before the mirror, adjusting his shirt collar like a little man, his dark brown hair slicked neatly with gel. "Mom, I think Grandma will like me in a navy new suit today." I paused for a second, swallowing the ache in my chest. He believed that. He still believed after all these years of being pushed aside. I nodded. "She'll be impressed, sweetheart." Aaron didn't say anything from the living room, but I could hear his fingers tapping rhythmically on the wooden table. He woke earlier than usual, wore a fresh blazer, tied his tie carefully, as if hoping his appearance could calm what lay beneath. We received the Whitmore family's Thanksgiving dinner invitation 3 days ago. Sent by formal mail, printed on thick embossed cardstock, our names listed at the very bottom. No personal note, no special gesture, but to Ethan, it was magic. "Grandma sent a letter to our house, that means she missed us, right, Mom?" He beamed, clutching the envelope like a Christmas card from Santa. I wanted to say something. Wanted to remind him how that very grandma once struck his name off the family gift list. How she once said, "That boy doesn't look like a Whitmore at all," right in the middle of a reunion dinner. But I couldn't. I couldn't crush the fragile hope flickering in a child's heart. "What should we bring, Mom?" "I'll bake the pumpkin pie, the kind you and Dad like." "I think Grandma will like it too." He said it with eyes so pure it made my chest tighten. I turned away, pretending to wipe the counter, hiding the tear welling at the corner of my eye. On Thanksgiving afternoon I stood in front of my closet for nearly half an hour, just to choose a blouse. Nothing too flashy, but not so plain I'd disappear among the couture gowns that would fill the party. I chose a pale cream silk blouse paired with a knee-length black skirt. Aaron stepped in, placing his hand gently on my shoulder. "You don't have to fit into their world, just be yourself, that's enough." I met his eyes in the mirror. But for me, fitting in means Ethan feels like he belongs. We left the house at 4:45 p.m. The Whitmore estate sat in Westbrook's suburbs, a neighborhood where even the porch lights glowed brighter than the fireplace in our home. The iron gates opened automatically, revealing an expansive front garden, where the rose bushes looked manicured for a royal ball. We parked beside Aaron's cousin's polished black Range Rover and his sister's white Audi. Ethan stepped out, shoes shining, arms holding tight to the pie box I'd baked. "Mom, where will Grandma sit? I want to sit next to her." I wanted to say, "She's going to avoid you like always." But I just smiled. "We'll see where the seats are once we go in, sweetheart." The 10-foot oak door opened, and the housekeeper bowed slightly to welcome us inside. The interior was stunning, high ceilings glittering with chandeliers, Persian carpets stretching from the entrance all the way to the long dining table. Relatives dressed as if they were walking the red carpet at the Emmys. I felt as small as a spare button on a shirt. "Aaron, Camila!" My father-in-law, Mr. Frederick, greeted us with a gentle smile, his warm hands resting on Ethan's shoulders. "You've grown so much. Want to introduce the dessert for me to try?" Ethan nodded, eyes lighting up like fireworks. "I picked the recipe myself, Grandpa." We took our assigned seats. My place was between Aaron and Ethan, while Margaret sat at the head of the table, 2 rows away. She wore a dark olive velvet gown, a shining pearl necklace, and greeted guests with a wax-like smile. I could feel her eyes land on me, not out of concern, but judgment. Ethan didn't notice. He waited, hoping she would turn, nod or at least glance at him with the warmth of family. But through the entire first part of dinner, she never once looked at her own grandson. Even so, Ethan kept smiling, sharing stories about school, his new teacher, and the essay he'd written titled, "Who I Love the Most," where he had written, "Grandma." I looked at him, speechless. There's a kind of love that refuses to die, even when trampled. And it scared me, how his little heart still believed in someone who kept pushing him away. "Ma." I turned. "What is it, honey?" "Can I ask to sit next to Grandma for a bit?" I gently squeezed his hand and pressed my lips together. "Let's wait a little longer, sweetie. We're about to start eating." But that was the moment everything began to fall apart. The clinking of knives and forks on porcelain rang out like a countdown to something terrible. I didn't know why, but there was a sense of dread simmering beneath the forced warmth in the air. Maybe it was the way Margaret glanced over then turned away, cold as ice. Maybe it was the eerie silence among people who usually couldn't stop talking. Or maybe it was the whisper I caught from one of the distant aunts. "She actually showed up?" I held Ethan's hand tighter. "Mom, where's our pie? Why hasn't it been brought out yet?" I didn't answer. Because at that moment, I didn't know the worst was still coming. Footsteps echoed from the hallway, heels clicking, steady and cold, with a rhythm that struck like pressure points across the room. Margaret appeared at the head of the table, her dark olive gown sweeping to her ankles, a diamond necklace so large it was almost grotesque. "Thank you all for coming." She spoke evenly, without an ounce of emotion. Family is sacred, even if for some it's a vague concept. Several eyes darted toward me. Aaron gripped the armrest, his lips pressed tightly. As everyone began taking their seats, marked with gold-plated name cards, I pulled out the chair for Ethan and froze. In front of my son, there wasn't porcelain, no silver cutlery, no crystal glass. There was a stainless steel bowl, the kind made for pets. It sat shamelessly on the white tablecloth, so out of place even the housekeeper stared. Inside was a heap of brown dry kibble, faintly fishy in smell, and etched into the side of the bowl was one word. Puppy. No one said anything. Not a breath. Just eyes locked on that bowl like a car crash you couldn't look away from. Ethan turned to me, blinking. "Mom, is this for me?" I felt my heart crack. Not shatter, but explode in silent agony. "Grandma, she must have made a mistake, right, Mom?" His voice trembled. Before I could speak, Margaret's voice rang out, syrupy sweet like artificial sugar, deadlier than any curse. "Oh?" I figured a child born from the slums didn't need silverware or fine china. A dog bowl should be more than enough, no? The entire table froze. One cousin gasped, her spoon clattering onto her plate. Mr. Frederick began to cough, and another child turned away, clearly unable to stomach the scene. Ethan didn't understand. My son was just 8 years old. All he could do was stare at the bowl, then around the room, and finally at me, his eyes asking, "Why?" Tears welled up, but I didn't let them fall. I couldn't, not here. I took a deep breath and stood, slowly, still holding my son's hand. The chair scraped softly against the floor, and silence blanketed the room. I lifted my head and looked straight into Margaret's icy gaze. Without flinching, "Thank you for the invitation." My voice was clear, steady. "We won't trouble you any further." I leaned down and whispered to Ethan, "Sweetheart, let's go." Aaron stood up immediately behind me, without hesitation. "That's enough, Mom, really. Enough." His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the dinner like a knife. We walked away from the table, each step echoing across the marble floor like a silent gunshot. No one stopped us. No one apologized. Just eyes hiding behind wine glasses, behind curtains, behind the false masks they'd worn for years. Out at the car, I opened the door for Ethan. My son didn't cry. He just sat there, his eyes hollow, staring out the window. I wanted to hold him, to say something, but there were no words. That humiliation wasn't aimed at me. It was directed at an innocent child. The car pulled away from the mansion, leaving behind lights and lies. No one spoke on the drive home. Just the sound of wind brushing the glass, and Ethan's soft breaths, as he tried to swallow down the bitterness rising in his throat. And I knew, in that moment, something inside me shattered completely. Not just my pride. Not just my trust. But the last thread tying me to what they called the Whitmore family. Ethan didn't cry when we left the mansion. He sat in the back seat, clutching the pie box that never made it to the dinner table. The streetlights flickered across his face, casting long shadows over his sad eyes. It wasn't the sorrow of a child who had been rejected. It was a numbing confusion, an emotion no 8-year-old should ever have to feel. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw his lips pressed tightly together. His hands trembled, as if trying to hold on to the last fragile shred of dignity left after the cheap shot delivered by the woman he called Grandma. Aaron kept his hands on the wheel, saying nothing, but his knuckles were white from how hard he gripped it. His anger didn't boil over, it burned low like hot coals in a sealed furnace, ready to ignite with a single wrong breath. When we got home, I gently led Ethan inside. The living room, normally filled with the smell of cinnamon buns and vanilla candles, felt frozen that night. I took off my coat and knelt to remove his shoes, but he still didn't say a word. Just looked down, still holding the pie box so tightly the lid bent out of shape. I glanced at Aaron, he nodded. I took Ethan into the bathroom and ran a warm bath. Want me to help you get changed, honey? Ethan nodded, eyes still fixed on the invisible space in front of him. I unbuttoned his shirt, took off his tie and blazer, each movement as delicate as if I were handling glass. His small shoulders quivered as I wiped his back with a soft towel. Not a single tear. Just the silent tremors of a child who didn't understand why love had been returned with humiliation. I wrapped him in a towel and held him close. Ethan. He looked up at me. His eyes were red, but he was still trying to hold it in. Mom, did I do something wrong? That question pierced my heart like a blade. I pulled him into a tighter hug. No, sweetheart, you did nothing wrong. The one who's wrong is the person who treated you like that. And with that, the dam broke. I just wanted Grandma to love me. I said nothing more. I just sat there, holding him in the steam, letting him cry. Cry for all the pain his little pride couldn't shield him from. When I tucked Ethan into bed, pulled the blanket over him and read a few pages of Charlotte's Web, his favorite book, he slowly drifted off to sleep. His eyes were still wet as they closed. I stepped out into the living room. Aaron stood by the window, gripping his phone. He'd changed out of his formal clothes, but hadn't removed his tie, like his mind was still trapped in that terrible evening. Before I could say anything, he spoke. I'm not letting this go. His voice was hoarse, low, but filled with unshakable resolve. I sat down on the sofa and looked at him. What are you going to do? End it, all of it. He dialed, put the phone to his ear. I didn't stop him. Because I knew it was time to cut out the cancer in this family. Mom? Aaron's voice was colder than the night itself. I heard something from the other end but couldn't make it out. Then he said slowly, each word etched in stone. Why did you do that to Ethan? He's 8 years old, Mom. You sat him in front of a dog bowl. That wasn't a joke, that was humiliation. I walked over to him. He grabbed my hand but didn't stop speaking. Listen, from this day forward, you are no longer part of our family. I'm resigning. I'm leaving Whitmore and Crane. I will not let my son grow up under that toxic shadow. I heard Margaret screaming on the phone, panic in her voice, like a trapped animal. But Aaron hung up without hesitation. He looked at me, his eyes burning. You've endured too much, so has Ethan. From now on, I'll protect both of you. I wrapped my arms around him. For the first time in years, we were looking in the same direction. No one standing between us. That night, Aaron called 4 of his closest partners. I sat nearby, quietly watching as he laid everything out, clearly, concisely, with no hesitation. I'm stepping down. But I'm not leaving alone. I'm starting a new company. A place without bias, without manipulation. The first to respond was Lucas Grant, the CFO. I'm with you. Then Jenna Ray, head of strategic clients. I've been waiting for this day. And just like that, the seeds of a quiet rebellion began to sprout. It was no longer just a reaction, it was action. The next morning, I woke up before sunrise. The bakery was the same as always. I brewed coffee, turned on the oven, prepped ingredients for the first batch. But today, something in me had changed. I was no longer a woman struggling to be accepted. I was a mother. And I would fight for my son. No matter who the enemy was or how powerful they seemed. On Monday morning, at 7:30, Aaron walked into the Whitmore and Crane headquarters for the last time. Charcoal gray suit, navy tie, and a slim leather briefcase in hand. But the heaviest thing he carried was unwavering resolve. The company's main office stood on Baxter Avenue, draped in company flags and banners promoting high-profile projects across Maine and Massachusetts. Aaron had climbed those steps thousands of times. But today, each step was a farewell. I didn't go with him that morning. He said, I need to finish this my own way. And I understood. Some battles a man has to fight alone. At 9 o'clock sharp in the 11th floor boardroom, Aaron called an emergency meeting with all department heads and the executive board. No flowers, no morning coffee, no polite smiles. "I'm here to say goodbye," Aaron began. His voice wasn't loud, but every word hit the table like a hammer. "I'm resigning, effective immediately, not just for personal reasons, but because I refuse to serve a corrupt system fueled by prejudice, coercion, and cruelty." The room fell silent. Margaret, his mother and current CEO, grew paler beneath her makeup. "Aaron, you sound like an angry child," she said, voice cold as steel. "You think clients will follow you? You think employees will leave this place to follow a rebel?" Aaron placed a stack of papers on the table. The resignation letters of Lucas Grant, Jenna Ray, and 5 other senior managers. "I don't think, I know." Margaret's fists clenched so tightly her veins bulged, but she had no response. Some board members glanced at each other, a few even nodded at Aaron as he rose and walked out of the room. There was no applause at that farewell. Only the sound of a door closing, heavy as a death knell for the empire Margaret once ruled with a fake smile. That afternoon, Aaron sent a company-wide email with a brief message. "I'm not leaving because I'm weak. I'm leaving because I'm strong enough not to keep living in silence. To those who still believe in justice, fairness, and human dignity, a new door is opening." In less than 48 hours, over 30 employees submitted their resignations. The sales department lost nearly all its team leaders. The partnerships division, where Jenna had been the director, was unable to process client requests due to staff shortages. The news spread faster than anyone expected. Local financial papers began running headlines. "Mass exodus at Whitmore and Crane, former executive Aaron Whitmore at the heart of the crisis." On the 3rd day I was checking the oven at the bakery when Aaron called. His voice was calm but firm. "You should hear this." "What happened?" "Lake Point Corporation has terminated its contract with Whitmore and Crane. Contract value, $27 million. I sank into a chair. Lake Point had been their biggest client for 8 years. Did they give a reason? "Yes, they want to work with the team I'm leading, not with a company that puts ego above professional ethics." Then came Thompson Properties, followed by Coastal Bridge Development. One client after another pulling out like dominoes, collapsing in sequence. Aaron's phone buzzed non-stop. "Lucas Grant. I've left headquarters, I'll meet you tonight, let's go over the plan." Jenna Ray. 3 strategic clients want to hear more about our new company." A former employee wrote. "I don't know what you're building, but if you call, I'm in." That evening, when Aaron came home, he sat on the wooden kitchen chair, sweat beading on his face, even though it was freezing outside. I set a mug of hot tea in front of him. "You've started a battle bigger than any contract." He looked at me, eyes red but alive. "Not a war, Camila, a liberation." He held my hand, as if to say more, but there was no need. We didn't know what the future would hold. But one thing I knew for certain. He was no longer alone. And for the first time in my life, I saw my husband truly free. I still remember that morning when everything started to fall apart. Not because of a board meeting or a lawsuit, but the front page of the main daily journal. The headline was bold, black and front and center. CEO, Whitmore under investigation for embezzlement and systemic workplace discrimination. I stared at the paper as if it were catching fire in my hands. Below the headline was a familiar photo. Margaret, her face still carefully made up, but her eyes revealed calculation and exhaustion. For the first time, I saw the real image of a woman who had lived her entire life behind a mask of pride. The article spanned 3 pages, filled with evidence and testimonies from former employees. She had used the company's private jet for personal shopping trips to Manhattan and Palm Beach, total annual cost over $350,000. The renovation of her Westbrook mansion, valued at more than $1.6 million, was disguised as a regional executive office. Racial discrimination and promotions. 3 Asian employees and 2 Black employees filed complaints alleging they were excluded from advancement lists, despite top performance. Female employees were forced to sign personal ethics contracts to be considered for major projects. One clause even regulated pregnancy. It was no longer rumor. The evidence came from internal emails, account statements, and even recordings of meetings. I turned each page, my hands trembling. Not from shock, but because everything I had ever sensed, ever suspected, was now printed, undeniable. The media storm erupted faster than anyone could have imagined. 3 major networks across New England ran continuous coverage. Journalists camped outside Whitmore and Crane's headquarters for 3 straight days. Margaret Whitmore's name shot to #1 on search engines in the Northeast overnight. On social media, post after post surfaced. I was forced to resign because I wouldn't attend a spa meeting the CEO demanded. I was the only female engineer on the team, but they gave the project to a newbie just because he was related to Margaret. Now, do you all believe it? That empire was built on cruelty and hypocrisy. Every hour brought new voices, former staff speaking up, fueling an uncontrollable wave of outrage. 2 days later, the board of directors convened an emergency meeting. I wasn't there, but one of Aaron's old contacts, the company's legal director, told me. "Camilla, I've never seen Margaret like that." She sat in silence, her makeup couldn't hide the shake in her voice. When they read the suspension decision, she didn't react. No protest, not a word. And just like that, in less than a week, the Queen of Whitmore and Crane had been dethroned. No farewell, no press conference, no internal announcement. Just a cold email sent at 4:12 a.m., with a subject line: Temporary Senior Management Adjustment. Margaret Whitmore withdraws from all executive roles. That afternoon, I was in the bakery kitchen, wiping caramel off a baking tray, when Aaron walked in. Sunlight angled through the window, casting a glow on his face, a calm I hadn't seen in years. "Just heard, the board forced Mom to step down completely." I looked at him. "How do you feel?" He paused, then said, "Like, a heavy book has finally been closed. Do you regret it?" He shook his head. "No, but there's a part of me that's sad. Because it didn't have to be this way." I understood. Margaret's downfall didn't bring him joy. It was just a necessary ending, and far too late. That night, I read the final chapter of Charlotte's Web to Ethan. He had started smiling again, at least on the outside. When I kissed his forehead, he asked, "Mom, is Grandma still mad at me?" I squeezed his hand. "She's learning how to be a person again." Ethan nodded. "I just want her to understand. I'm not a dog." My heart clenched. I held him for a long time, saying nothing more. Because in that one sentence, my son understood more than any adult sitting in the boardroom of a collapsing company. Exactly 29 days after the night we left the Westbrook mansion in silence, the first sign bearing the name Whitmore and Whitmore Associates was mounted on the facade of a 3-story building in the center of Portland's business district. Aaron chose the name, not to preserve Margaret's legacy, but to redefine what the name Whitmore meant. "I don't need to abandon my name just because my mother did wrong," he told me the night before the opening. "I'll rebuild it, so one day Ethan can proudly say, 'I'm Ethan Whitmore.'" There was no grand launch party, no champagne, no media coverage. Just one small conference room, 5 desks, a wall plastered with plans, and 15 people who had left Whitmore and Crane to follow Aaron. Among them were Lucas Grant, head of finance, Jenna Ray, client strategy lead, 2 veteran construction engineers, and 3 young employees once excluded from projects simply because they didn't go to school with someone's son. No one was promised dream salaries. No one was guaranteed an office with an ocean view. But they all shared one thing: belief that this time, they were building something right. In the first week, they signed 2 contracts with former partners, worth just over $1 million, but enough to keep the lights on and the sign in place. By the second week, a group of clients from Massachusetts called, offering to transfer their entire real estate portfolio to the new company. In week 3, Portland Business Weekly published a 2-page feature praising Aaron's new leadership philosophy. People first, profits second, and everything else will follow. By day 30, they had 9 projects in progress, 17 employees, and steady positive cash flow. As for Margaret, no one spoke of her anymore. The spotlight had shifted to a rising name. Aaron Whitmore, the man who gave up everything to start over. One evening, as I was closing the bakery, Aaron walked in. Shirt still dusted with flour, eyes tired but glowing. He placed an envelope on the table. "You should read this." I opened it. A handwritten letter, on old Whitmore and Crane stationery. At the top, just one name. Robert Whitmore. I had never been close to Frederick's father, the man he called Robert. He was quiet, reserved, and often stayed out of Margaret's battles with everyone else. I used to think he was a coward. But in the letter, he wrote, "Aaron, to be a father and not protect my son from his mother, that is the greatest failure of my life. When you walked away from the company, when Camila took Ethan from that dinner table and I said nothing, I knew I had lost more than just a family. I'm sorry. If you'll allow it, I would like to meet, not to explain but to start again. If not as father and son, then at least as 2 men trying to rebuild something better. Robert." I looked up at Aaron. "Are you going to respond?" He nodded. "I don't resent him anymore. And Ethan deserves to know what a healthy relationship between a father and grandfather looks like." The meeting happened on a Sunday morning at a small lakeside cafe. I stayed in the car with Ethan while Aaron went inside first. Through the window I saw the 2 men face each other. Robert took off his coat, poured water for his son. A small gesture, but one I had never seen from him before. They spoke, cautiously at first. But then, I saw Robert smile. Aaron nodded. And finally they shook hands. When Aaron came back to the car, Ethan jumped forward from the back seat. "Can I go in, Mom?" I nodded. "Yes, but only ask what you really want to know." "I just want to ask if Grandpa likes apple pie." 3 weeks later, the company's front sign was updated to Whitmore and Whitmore Associates. A family-built legacy for the future. Robert didn't return to the company in an executive role. He made a small investment, acted as an honorary advisor and occasionally joined strategic meetings, as a quiet form of atonement, without making announcements. Aaron didn't need praise. I didn't need recognition. Ethan only needed someone to call him grandson and ask what he learned at school today. And that alone told us we were on the right path. Nearly 6 months after Whitmore and Whitmore Associates was founded, I happened to see Margaret on the evening local news. Not in the business section, not at a charity gala, not in an inspirational interview. She appeared in the corner of a security camera outside a rundown apartment complex near Back Cove, where most residents were retirees or divorcees. Her hair was visibly gray, no longer dyed. The elegant suits she once wore had been replaced by a worn, beige wool coat, buttoned unevenly at the collar. She walked past the camera with a paper bag in hand, not from Whole Foods but from a local corner store. Her back was slightly hunched. Her face, once the symbol of New England real estate power, now looked like a wrinkled sheet of paper from a decayed past. I turned off the TV, saying nothing. Aaron looked at me and asked just one question. "What do you see?" I replied. "The cost of arrogance." And then I added, "And the most fitting punishment, to be forgotten." No one mentioned Margaret anymore at corporate events. The same people who once tipped their hats to her, poured her wine, giggled at her stories during galas, now pretended not to know her when her name showed up in the news. Her social media accounts, once followed by over 100,000 people, had dwindled to just a few thousand, mostly those leaving hateful comments. No one invited her to speak, no magazines asked her opinion about the market. She lived like a ghost, wandering through the fractured memories she created for herself. The Westbrook mansion had been foreclosed by the bank. All its luxury furnishings were auctioned off publicly. She moved into a 2-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of a walk-up building. No housekeeper, no driver, not even anyone to talk to. People said she sat by the window every Sunday afternoon, holding a glass of cheap wine, watching families pass by on the street below. Once, a neighbor said she whispered something to herself. Quiet, but still audible. I used to have it all. Meanwhile, our lives entered a different phase. Gentler, simpler, and warmer than ever. Ethan and Grandpa Robert became unexpectedly close. At first it was just walks around the park. Then came Saturday morning baking sessions, where Robert took his role of oven temperature monitor very seriously. One time, I saw him crouch down, listening to Ethan explain the salted caramel tart recipe, his eyes as focused as if hearing a product strategy presentation from a top executive. I think we should add some orange zest at the end to make it smell better. Then try it. Science without experimentation is just theory. I stood behind the kitchen door, not stepping in, just silently watching the two of them. And suddenly, I realized, some cracks can't be mended, but some broken pieces can still come together to create something even more beautiful. One evening in late September, when golden leaves covered the streets, Aaron, Ethan and I sat under the soft yellow light in our kitchen, having dinner. The main course was creamy mushroom soup, made by Ethan, with guidance from Grandpa. "Mom," Ethan asked, "can I write an invitation for Grandpa Robert to come to my school's Christmas concert?" I smiled. "Of course you can. Then, should I invite Grandma Margaret too?" No one said anything for a few seconds. Aaron set down his spoon and looked at our son. "Son, kindness is a beautiful thing, but you're not required to share it with someone who doesn't appreciate it." Ethan nodded. "Then maybe next time." I looked at my husband. No bitterness, no resentment. Just a quiet truth recognized. And accepted. A week later, while I was watering the plants on the porch, the mailman delivered a gray envelope with no return address. Inside was a thin, folded piece of paper. Just 3 lines. "I have nothing left. But at least, now I understand." I folded the paper back, not giving it to Aaron. Not to hide it, but because it was too late for last-minute realizations. That December, Ethan stood on the stage of Riverside Elementary and sang a solo of Silent Night. His voice rang out, pure and emotional, so much so that the audience applauded for nearly a full minute after he finished. I squeezed Aaron's hand. Robert sat in the front row, eyes misty. "He doesn't have to struggle to be accepted," he whispered. "He just needs to grow up in a family that loves the right way." I looked up at the stage, where Ethan bowed, cheeks flushed, a radiant smile on his face. And I knew. The final darkness had passed, and the next generation was beginning in the light. Camilla's story is a powerful reminder that reputation and power cannot mask cruelty or discrimination. Though she came from humble beginnings, she used strength and love to protect her son from harm, even daring to stand against a high society family. While the arrogant collapsed into isolation and obscurity, Camilla and her small family found peace, connection, and a new beginning, where light was built on compassion, not prestige. What do you think of Camilla's choices and the ending Margaret received? Was emotional justice truly served? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt family stories to come. Some shocks hit you as fast as a bullet, and by the time you realize you have been shot, everything is already beyond saving. I used to think the greatest pain of my life was losing my parents. I was wrong. The real pain was discovering that the remaining family had stabbed me without even blinking. On the day of the will reading, I finally understood. Family does not always mean love. My name is Mia Carter, 27 years old, born and raised in the suburbs of Charleston, South Carolina. My parents, Mr. Henry and Mrs. Linda Carter, were wealthy entrepreneurs owning numerous properties and shares in major companies. To outsiders, our family was the ideal model: successful, powerful, and proud. We filled the dusty oak-paneled room of Rawlings and Company law office. I wore a simple black dress, my hands numb from clenching so tightly, while my perfect older sister, Vanessa Carter, 30 years old, donned a brand new Chanel outfit, her lips curled into a sly smirk. When Mr. Rawlings, the aging family lawyer, began reading the will, each word felt like it was slicing into my skin. To our beloved daughter Vanessa, he paused, adjusting his glasses. We leave the entire real estate portfolio, financial assets, and the mansion in the Hamptons. Vanessa tilted her head, her diamond ring flashing with each subtle movement, her eyes gliding over me with a look of pure satisfaction, as if she had declared victory over my dead body. And me? Mr. Rawlings continued, his voice gravelly as if struggling with discomfort. To our daughter Mia, the old Carter farm located in the outskirts of Rock Creek, Wyoming. Silence fell over the room like a suffocating blanket. I could not breathe. The old farm? The one abandoned for over 2 decades since Grandpa's death? A desolate piece of land, with a crumbling house, and waist-high weeds? Laughter, cold as a knife's edge, sliced through the silence. Vanessa. Makes sense, she sneered, folding her arms. Mia always preferred playing in mud over attending cocktail parties anyway. Laughter spread like a virus among the aunts and uncles, who once patted my head and called me sweet little Mia. Today, their eyes saw nothing but a failure. I bit my lip until the metallic taste of blood filled my mouth, but I did not shed a single tear. I would not give them that satisfaction. There must be some mistake, one aunt, Mrs. Diane, blurted out, her voice a mix of confusion and irritation. Henry and Linda would never leave Mia with just that chicken coop. Mr. Rawlings shook his head, flipping to a page stamped with a bright red seal. The will was properly signed and legally certified. There is no mistake. Vanessa shrugged dramatically, her expensive gold bracelet jingling lightly. Oh, come on, Aunt Diane. Mia loves nature. A rundown farm in Wyoming will be her little paradise. A short, razor-sharp laugh escaped Vanessa's lips. I stood up, my fingers trembling as they clenched the rusty old key Mr. Rawlings had handed me, along with a manila envelope containing the property deed. No one stopped me as I walked out of that room saturated with hypocrisy. No one even called after me. They had decided I was only worthy of dust and decay. My old Honda Civic roared as I sped out of the parking lot, the engine growling like the anger boiling inside me. I had lost my parents, and now I had lost my family too. I gripped the key tighter, a spark of fury igniting deep within my chest. If they thought I would crawl back to Vanessa begging for crumbs, they were dead wrong. I had the farm. I had myself. And I swore, even if it was nothing but ruins, I would turn it into something they could never dare to look down on again. Even if the whole world turned its back on me, I would keep walking forward. My eyes burned, not with pain anymore, but with fire. The road to Rock Creek stretched endless and lonely, as if daring me to turn back. But I did not. The land my family saw as a burden would be where I began anew, or it would bury me trying. My Honda rattled violently as I crossed the rusted gates of Carter Farm. Everything was exactly as I imagined, or worse. Weeds grew taller than a man. Broken fences leaned and sagged. The main house stood like a sagging gray corpse under the heavy cloudy sky. But what drew my eyes instantly was the old barn at the far end of the property. Its tin roof was pockmarked like Swiss cheese. Its wooden planks rotted so badly a strong gust could knock it over. Yet somehow, it still stood. Like an old soldier too stubborn to fall. I pulled up my collar against the cold, gripped the bunch of keys tight, and trudged toward the barn. Every step sank deep into the muddy ground. The freezing air cut through my skin. My hand trembled as I touched the rotting door, a hard shove. The hinges screamed into the empty air, a sound like a soul wailing from the underworld. Inside, it was pitch black, with only a few lonely beams of light piercing through cracks in the walls. Rusted tractors, shattered crates, and broken farming tools lay scattered like bones in a graveyard. But something felt wrong. I had been here before. A distant memory surfaced. 5-year-old me, gripping Grandpa Jacob Carter's rough hand. Sneaking into this very barn. He had whispered in his warm, gravelly voice. The greatest treasures are never found on the surface, little Mia. I scanned the dusty space. Something was off. The inside dimensions did not match the outside. My heart thudded painfully as I knelt by the north wall. I vaguely remembered Grandpa's old game, 3 taps, then push a certain plank. My fingers searched the splintered wood until they found a slight bump. Yeah. Tap. The air around me seemed to freeze solid. I took a deep breath and pressed the 4th board from the bottom. Blick. A small but sharp sound pierced the silence. Beneath my feet, part of the floor shuddered. I stumbled back, watching wide-eyed as a square hatch silently creaked open, revealing a staircase descending into utter darkness. Before, I might have run, but today fear was not what pushed me. Today, a fierce need burned inside me. I had to know the truth. Turning on the flashlight from my phone, I carefully stepped down each creaky stair, my breath pounding in my ears. The air down there was freezing, and heavy with the smell of mold. The staircase led to a spacious room, perfectly hidden beneath the layer of dry earth and stone. Faint light swept across the walls, covered in papers, maps, and charts I could not immediately understand. At the center of the room stood a large work table blanketed in dust, a tattered canvas sheet draped over complicated machinery, gauges, test tubes, and sample analyzers. A laboratory. Right beneath the ground. I could barely believe my eyes. Grandpa Jacob, the man the entire family had mocked as the eccentric old man, had secretly built a research facility right in what they had deemed worthless land. The flashlight flickered toward the corner of the room. A large safe stood, towering, covered in thick cobwebs. I approached it, palms drenched in sweat. 3 spins, and I gambled on the only number I thought Grandpa might use, my birthday, July 16, 1997. Then, the lock popped open. Slowly, I pulled the heavy door aside. Inside was no gold or cash, but a dark brown leather-bound notebook, and a USB drive carefully wrapped in a waterproof leather pouch. I flipped open the notebook. On the first page, written in neat blue ink, it said, "To Mia, the only grandchild who ever truly saw the real value, if you are reading this, it is time for the truth to be revealed." My fingers trembled as I turned each page. Inside were detailed notes on geological surveys, chemical analyses, and complex engineering schematics I only faintly understood. There was one thing I was absolutely certain of. Grandpa had discovered something profoundly important and had entrusted it to me, not to anyone else. I looked up, the flashlight beam cutting across the dusty ceiling. At that moment, I swore to myself. Whether it was treasure, technology, or something far beyond imagination, I would uncover it all. Because I now held something they, the family who had discarded me, could never take back. I plugged the USB into the battered laptop I had brought along, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it would shatter my chest. The screen flickered, then a single folder appeared named Project Perseus. I swallowed hard, my hand trembling as I moved the mouse to open the first file. Documents flooded the screen. Geological diagrams, mineral survey reports, process flow charts, along with dozens of patents signed under the name Jacob A. Carter. I flipped through the leather notebook on the table, piecing together the information. My grandpa was no crazy old fool as everyone had believed. He had uncovered one of the largest rare earth deposits in the northwestern United States, right underneath the Rock Creek Farm. Not only that, he had invented a completely new rare earth extraction method. Costs 60% lower than traditional methods. No groundwater contamination. No toxic waste residue. A technology that could overturn the entire mining industry. A technology that would drive multinational corporations insane if they ever found out it existed. I sat frozen on the cold concrete floor, the flashlight beam swaying over the detailed mineral map carefully framed and hung on the wall. Beneath the barren, desolate ground was a treasure. Not gold or silver, but materials even more precious in the tech era. Neodymium, dysprosium, praseodymium. The essential elements for manufacturing electric motors, smartphones, and renewable energy systems. I turned to the final page of the notebook. A small slip of paper was tucked between the sheets, written in the familiar slanted handwriting. Mia, if you are reading this, know that I trust you. What I leave behind is not meant for the greedy, but for those with vision. Be cautious, they will try to steal it. Never let greed guide your way. I closed the notebook, a fierce wave of emotion rising in my chest. For years, I had lived in Vanessa's shadow. Belittled, forgotten, shoved aside. But now, I held the key to changing my life. Not just my life, but a part of the world's future as well. There was another folder on the USB, labeled Legal. I opened it, holding my breath. Inside were scanned copies of filed patents, complete with application numbers. Grandpa had completed all the legal steps necessary, but had deliberately left the commercialization dormant. Among the documents was a notarized letter of authorization stating that all intellectual property developed on Rock Creek Farm belonged solely to Mia Carter. What did that mean? It meant that every invention, every mineral deposit beneath my feet, was legally mine. No one, not a single person, could demand a share. I let out a dry laugh in the freezing underground bunker. All those years, they had looked at me like I was worthless. And now, I was sitting on a gold mine they never even knew existed. But I understood. If word of this got out too soon, I would be crushed before I had a chance to stand. Vanessa, Aunt Diane, the leeches who lived off inheritance. If they found out, they would stop at nothing to take it from me. I had to move carefully. I had to make this real before anyone noticed. I shut down the laptop, packed the USB and the notebook tightly into my backpack, and zipped it up. Standing up, I looked around the underground room one last time. Every wall, every piece of paper here, was Grandpa's true legacy. Not lavish mansions or flashy parties, but knowledge, trust, and the chance to build my own worth. I climbed the stairs, every step heavy, but my heart surging with determination. The secret door slammed shut behind me. Outside, the night wind howled bitterly. I tilted my head up toward the pitch-black sky, silently promising. The game was only just beginning. I returned to the old wooden house with a burning fire raging in my veins. There was no time to drown in emotions. I needed to act, fast, precise, and absolutely discreet. That night, under the dim light, I dug through old contact books and emails, searching for connections I had slowly built during my years working in finance in Charleston. I knew I could not do this alone. But I also could not reveal too much to anyone. The first number I dialed was Daniel Morgan, a corporate lawyer I had met while consulting on an infrastructure investment project. He was notorious for his discretion and absolute loyalty, at a steep price. The call lasted barely 3 minutes. I need to meet you. This has to remain completely confidential. If you refuse, we will pretend this call never happened. Daniel responded with a single sentence. Send me the address by text. I will be there within 12 hours. I did not stop. The second call went to Dr. Hannah Lee, a mining engineer who had won awards for her research in sustainable mining. I knew she was being suppressed in a major corporation and was always looking for a chance to do something groundbreaking. Hannah, if you are ready to leave everything behind to join a project that could change the industry, I have what you are looking for. Silence. Then a deep breath of excitement from the other end. Send me the address and the start date. The final call was to Ryan Cole, an independent financial consultant who had left Wall Street because he could no longer stomach the dirty games in the banking world. A brilliant strategist, but more importantly, loyal only to his own principles. Ryan, I said bluntly, I need someone who can keep money clean like a polished altar. I am not doing anything illegal, but I need anonymity." He let out a raspy laugh. "You have piqued my curiosity, Mia Carter." 3 days later, at a shabby motel 20 miles outside Rock Creek, we sat around a plastic table. No contracts, no paperwork. Just a verbal agreement. I spread out the USB drive, copies of patents, and mineral survey files before them. Daniel's eyes narrowed like a blade. Hannah almost gasped with excitement. Ryan remained silent, but his half-smile said everything. "We set up a company immediately," Daniel said, tapping the table quickly. "Not under your direct name. I will create a chain of subsidiaries, each owning a small part, so no one can trace the real owner." Hannah sketched a technology diagram on the back of a motel receipt. "I can set up a small-scale lab within 3 months if you can find a reliable supplier. Your grandpa's old lab foundation is solid enough for it." Ryan simply lifted his coffee cup, squinting. "I will establish a separate investment fund funneling capital into each phase through offshore accounts. If anyone snoops, all they will see is a bunch of obscure green tech companies." I nodded, each word heavy, like nails hammered into blood and bone. There can be no mistakes. One leak and we are dead. They needed no more convincing. They had chosen to walk this path with me. 2 weeks later, the dilapidated barn had transformed. We installed new electrical systems, private satellite Wi-Fi, air filtration units, and rows of specialized computers. Small-scale extraction devices were placed in the underground bunker, connected to the barn by a narrow passage Hannah designed. The exterior walls of the barn remained, covered in rotting wood, perfectly disguising the high-tech research center inside. We named the project Helios Labs, at Hannah's suggestion, meaning light within the earth. The official company name on paperwork was Rock Creek Sustainable Resources, LLC, with no traceable link to the Carter family. Every day, I worked from dawn until midnight, poring over each page of Grandpa's documents, updating the latest advancements in sustainable mining technology, and discussing with Hannah how to optimize the process. At night, standing alone inside the silent barn, I would tilt my head back, staring at the patchy ceiling, feeling a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. I knew I was playing a big game, one where if I failed, I would lose everything, and if I succeeded, I would rewrite my destiny. But deeper than ambition or fear, there was one thing I knew for certain. I would never let anyone steal what I and my grandpa had built. Not Vanessa. Not greedy family. Not anyone. The cold April wind blew fiercely, scattering white flyers across Rock Creek's main street. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the hem of my simple dark blue dress. Today was the wedding day of Vanessa Carter, the family's golden child, the symbol of success they once paraded in front of me to measure and belittle. This ceremony was held at a private estate in Charleston. The very home that once belonged to my parents, now solely Vanessa's property, after the shameful division of the inheritance. I had almost decided not to go. Honestly, I had no desire to see their fake smiles. But Daniel, my lawyer, had reminded me, sometimes being at the right place at the right time is what makes a counterstrike truly sweet. So, I went. When I stepped into the grand hall, the crystal chandelier blazed overhead, casting glittering light onto the polished marble floors. Guests dressed in extravagant outfits, laughter and chatter echoing loudly through the space. Vanessa stood on the stage, her crystal-studded wedding gown shimmering like falling stars, hand in hand with her new husband, a hedge fund manager named Luke Patterson, infamous for his talent at spending other people's money. When her eyes caught mine, the corners of her mouth lifted into a cold smile, as if bestowing pity upon a loser. "Mia," she called sweetly. "Oh, you had some free time to attend? How is the farm doing?" I clutched my small clutch tightly and gave a light, airy smile. "Doing fine, quite busy lately." Luke squinted, curious. "I hear farmland investments are profitable these days." I just shrugged, smiling as if it were a trivial matter. Sometimes the things people think are worthless turn out to be surprisingly profitable. Vanessa burst out laughing, her laughter echoing like shattered bells, causing a few guests nearby to chuckle along. I stayed silent, my gaze calm as I watched each pitying pat on the back they gave me. If they knew that just a few hours earlier, Rock Creek Sustainable Resources had signed 3 exclusive rare earth supply contracts with top tech corporations in the United States, valued at over $200 million during the trial phase, would they still dare to laugh? No, definitely not. Immediately after that lavish wedding ceremony, while Vanessa and her new husband honeymooned in the Maldives, at Rock Creek, our Helios Labs moved into Phase 2. Official extraction. Hannah supervised each drilling machine operating around the clock, while Daniel handled a mountain of complex contracts to ensure everything remained untraceable to me. Ryan stayed busy, constructing a financial maze more complicated than a labyrinth, hiding every stream of incoming capital. We worked like people racing against death. No mistakes, no delays, not a moment of carelessness. And then, when everything ran smoothly, when the samples passed every stringent test, when tech companies lined up to sign long-term contracts, I gave Daniel the order for the final move. On May 17th, Rock Creek Sustainable Resources officially listed on the NASDAQ under the stock symbol RCA. The news exploded like an atomic bomb. Rural startup breaks China's rare earth monopoly, Wall Street Journal headlined on the front page. Clean mining technology, a turning point for the industry, Forbes analyzed. Rock Creek Sustainable Resources, from abandoned farm to green gold mine, Bloomberg commented. In just 24 hours, the company's market value hit $1.02 billion. I stood before the computer screen in the renovated barn, frozen, watching the numbers dance. No raucous celebration parties. No flashy social media posts. Just me, my small team, and the sound of quiet, exhilarated sighs. We had won. A clean, silent victory, sharper than any blade. That afternoon my phone rang non-stop. Unknown numbers. Interview requests. Acquisition offers. I turned off my phone, answering no one. Because I knew the real storm was still coming. Vanessa, Aunt Diane, and the rest of the relatives who once treated me like an invisible shadow, surely they were now scrambling to figure out what had happened. And I was ready. Ready for every wave of chaos they were about to unleash. Because this time, I was no longer Mia, the lost, useless little sister in their eyes. I was the true heir to the Carter legacy. I knew that call would come. I just did not think it would come so soon. On Monday afternoon, as I was reviewing a new extraction contract with Hannah and Ryan for an electric vehicle company, my phone buzzed violently. A familiar number flashed on the screen. Aunt Patricia. I smirked, not needing to answer to guess what it was about. She must have smelled money. I let the phone ring until the 5th buzz before picking up, my voice steady. Hello? Aunt Patricia's shrill voice squealed like a brake on a slick road. Mia, sweetheart. We need to talk. Families should enjoy the fruits together, right? I tilted my head back, staring at the barn ceiling. The same ceiling that had witnessed countless nights of me poring over Grandpa's documents. And laughed. Coldly. By sharing, you mean dividing up the worthless piece of dirt you once scoffed at. Silence stretched so long that I could hear her swallowing hard. Do not be so bitter, dear. Your parents would not want to see siblings and relatives divided over money. I tightened my grip on the phone. Really, Aunt, where was that spirit of unity when it was time to split the inheritance? Without waiting for her reply, I hung up. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew. The real battle had only just begun. 3 days later, I received a court summons. Short, cold. Vanessa Carter and Patricia Carter had filed a lawsuit demanding the division of hidden assets from the Rock Creek property. I laughed dryly, right there in the dusty barnyard. They thought they could bang drums and demand a share and I would panic and beg for mercy? They had forgotten one thing. I was no longer the lost little Mia they used to dismiss. On the day of the hearing, Vanessa showed up with a legal team as big as an NFL roster, wearing a brand new Givenchy dress, her fake confident smile plastered across her face. Aunt Patricia lumbered alongside her, squeezed into a tight dress, eyes sharp like razors. And me? A perfectly tailored charcoal gray suit, hair neatly pinned up, gaze cold as ice. Daniel Morgan, my lawyer, strode beside me, his face unreadable. The trial ended quicker than I expected. Their side argued that the inventions, mineral deposits, and Rock Creek sustainable resources should all be considered common family property, to be divided. Daniel stood, his voice cutting like a blade. According to the will, certified in 2004, the entire Rock Creek property, including all structures, physical assets, and intellectual property developed on site, belongs solely to Mia Carter. All inventions, mineral findings, and extracted products fall under inherited assets. This clause is clearly written, signed, and sealed. He slid a thick, heavy copy of the will across the table to the judge. A paper worth millions if you knew how to read it. Vanessa's face flushed red, then drained to ghostly white within minutes. Aunt Patricia's lips twisted, as if she had bitten into a lemon. Finally, the judge struck the gavel, his voice firm. The lawsuit is dismissed. All disputed assets are legally owned by the defendant, Mia Carter. A clean, precise victory, leaving no loophole. But I did not stop there. 3 days later, I personally sent invitations to Vanessa and the remaining close relatives to attend a family meeting at the old mansion, the very place where they had once discarded me like trash. When everyone was crammed around the long walnut wood table, where they had once judged my every move, I stood up and pulled an old leather notebook from my coat pocket. The notebook of Grandpa Jacob Carter. The air was heavy, like lead. I opened the notebook, flipping to a page marked with silver foil. My voice rang out, steady without a tremble. Mia, I left you this land, not because it is valuable now, but because I know, one day, only you, the one who truly understands real value, will see potential where others only see desolation. You are the greatest legacy the Carter family has ever produced. Never doubt that. I closed the notebook, my gaze sweeping across each stunned face in the room. That is why, I said slowly, each word slicing through the faint glimmers of hope left in their eyes. Grandpa left nothing to those who chased after shiny metals. He left it to the one who knew how to dig deep, with her own hands. Vanessa lunged forward, her voice hoarse. We are family, Mia. He was my grandpa too. I smiled, my gaze sharp as ice. Family? When you abandoned me, mocked me, treated me like garbage? No, Vanessa, blood cannot salvage a rotten heart. I closed the leather notebook, buttoned my coat, and walked out of that room without looking back. Behind me, only the sounds of desperate cries and heated arguments remained. Stepping outside, the June wind whipped through my hair. I took a deep breath, smiling for the first time in years. Finally, I had reclaimed everything. Not just assets, but my own dignity and worth. And I swore there would be much more waiting ahead. I knew they would not give up easily. The week following that humiliating family meeting, Vanessa and Aunt Patricia took turns texting, calling, and emailing. Their words softer now, but the greed still oozed from every sentence like the smell of blood in a shark tank. Mia, I am sorry for being so impulsive. We are family after all. Aunt truly wants everyone to grow together, dear. Let's not let money divide us. I read them all. Did not reply. Deep inside, I felt no hatred. Only emptiness. Those people had taught me one thing over the years. True value is never found in your wallet, but in what you build with your own hands. One early morning, as the first light of the sun spilled over the Rock Creek prairie, I sat on the barn porch, cradling a cup of hot coffee, gazing into the distance. Daniel approached, handing me a thick folder. We did it. We bought the entire Charleston estate. I took it, flipping through each signed sealed page. The buyer was listed as Helios Education Foundation, a nonprofit educational fund newly established by Daniel and me. No one, not even Vanessa, knew that the mansion they once paraded as their crown jewel had quietly changed owners. 3 months later, Vanessa plunged into financial crisis. The risky investments made by Luke, her new husband, had failed miserably. The mansion was publicly listed for sale to repay mortgage debts. I did not show up. I did not need to. I simply, quietly, sent a team to complete the transaction. When Vanessa packed her last luxury item and left the mansion she once saw as her pride, I was sitting in Rock Creek, signing the renovation plan to transform the estate into the Helena Carter Science Education Center. Named after my beloved late grandmother, a place for poor children who thirsted for knowledge but were never given a chance. On the opening day of the center, I stood in the grand hall, completely refurbished, freshly painted white walls, hallways shining with LED lights, and a high-tech science lab expanded into the backyard. Children in light blue uniforms laughed with delight as they touched microscopes for the first time, as they assembled tiny electric motor models with their own hands. A curly-haired girl tugged at my sleeve, her eyes sparkling. "Miss, I want to build machines like Tesla someday." I chuckled, kneeling down. "And you will, even greater than Tesla." That was the real legacy. Not land. Not empty mansions. But creating opportunities, planting hope, and igniting the dreams of young hearts. Vanessa heard the news not long after. One afternoon, as I supervised the construction of a new biology lab, she appeared, standing silently outside the gate. I saw her. Haggard, her once proud face pale. Her eyes heavy with something I could no longer recognize as jealousy or regret. No words needed. No mocking smiles. No pointless arguments. I simply nodded politely, then turned and walked into the center, the laughter of children following every step I took. I had won. Not by humiliating them, but by living a life they could never understand. One late night, as the wind howled across the vast fields, I sat alone on the porch of the wooden house, Grandpa Jacob Carter's notebook resting on my lap. I flipped back to the first page, where his handwriting had faded over time. "True value is not what you inherit, but what you create and share," I whispered, as if making a new promise to myself. "I will never forget, Grandpa." Under the deep night sky, I closed my eyes, letting the wind carry away the past. Tomorrow, I would continue building, with my own hands, a future no one could ever steal. 3 years after Rock Creek Sustainable Resources was listed on the NASDAQ, the world had changed. And so had I. Rock Creek Sustainable Resources, the company we had once only hoped could survive, had now become a global pioneer in sustainable rare earth mining technology. The media called us a historic catalyst for the green mining industry. Investment funds scrambled to pour money into RCSR stock. The company's market capitalization reached $12 billion at the beginning of this year. A number that, had someone mentioned it 3 years ago, I would have thought they were telling a fairy tale. But it was no miracle. It was sweat, tears, sleepless nights, wrestling with every contract line, every research figure, every mental battle against a world full of doubt. And above all, it was the unwavering belief in a dream that only I had dared to see amidst the ruins. I did not move into a luxurious mansion in Miami or Manhattan, as many had expected. I stayed in Rock Creek, in the old 2-story wooden house of Grandpa Jacob Carter, where old memories crept between the faded floorboards. I only repaired what was necessary. Reinforced the foundation, replaced the plumbing and wiring, planted a small garden of lavender and sage around the house. No need for extravagance. No need to prove anything to anyone. Every morning, I woke at sunrise, brewed a strong black coffee, and walked slowly across the cleared yard to the old barn. That barn, the one Vanessa once mocked as a rotting chicken coop, was now the true heart of a world-changing empire. Beside, where the rough wooden walls still bore the scratches from Grandpa's time. Modern equipment now operated silently in the underground bunkers below. Above, I kept the original structure intact: the scratched work table, the creaky wooden chair, and the blackboard where Grandpa once sketched his wildest ideas. Sometimes, I would stand before that blackboard, running my fingers over the faint chalk lines, wondering what dreams he had whispered into the dark. There were days I sat for hours in silence, letting the winds of Rock Creek whistle through the cracks. There were days I reread the old leather notebook, each line reminding me of the path I had taken and why I started. Not for money, not for fame, but for a deep respect for true value, the kind most of the world had long forgotten amidst the gold rush fever. Under my leadership, Rock Creek Sustainable Resources did more than just extract minerals. We set a new standard for the entire industry, restoring the environment after mining, funding scholarships for environmental engineering students, and developing vocational training programs for local communities. We proved that it was possible to build wealth without destroying the world. That intelligence and perseverance, not blind greed, were the true forces that unearthed real treasures. Occasionally, I received letters from major corporations offering to buy the company. The numbers they proposed could shake anyone: $15 billion, $20 billion. But I always replied with a single sentence: Rock Creek does not sell value, we build value. Vanessa? And Patricia? They had disappeared from my life like wandering winds. Rumor had it that Vanessa now worked part-time at a small car dealership in Savannah, struggling to pay off her debts. Aunt Patricia was said to be drifting from town to town, chasing opportunities she never found. I felt no triumph, only peace. Because I understood now. The best revenge is living a life they can never reach. One summer evening, as the sunset painted the Wyoming prairie crimson, I stood before the barn, holding an old photograph of Grandpa and me. A little curly-haired girl with wide innocent eyes, a silver-haired man, smiling kindly. I pressed the photo against my heart and closed my eyes. "I did it, Grandpa," I whispered. "But this journey has only just begun." Deep inside, I knew one thing for certain. No matter how far I went, no matter how high Rock Creek soared, I would always remember that everything began with one man daring to believe in a little girl no one else cared to notice. From a simple moment, a touch on an old wooden board, a secret door swinging open, a seed of trust, planted quietly, blossoming into a brilliant sky. Mia Carter's story reminds us that true value is not in what we are given, but in how we turn small beginnings into great legacies. Despite being overlooked and rejected, Mia not only stood tall but built a sustainable empire that changed an entire industry. In real life, success does not come from easy inheritance, but from perseverance, wisdom, and unwavering faith in hidden potential, even when the whole world turns away. What do you think about Mia's journey and the choices she made? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And do not forget to follow the channel to discover more touching stories and profound life lessons about family and resilience. I used to think the worst thing was betrayal, but no, the worst is being erased from your own life by the very people who share your last name. They didn't stab me with knives, they killed me with invisibility. By pretending I never existed. That day, at my brother's 38th birthday party, I understood it more clearly than ever. They invited me to play a silent extra in the Flawless Family performance, and the most painful part? I once believed I was still one of them. My name is Zoe Whitman, 33 years old, a financial analyst at an investment firm in Portland. Despite earning well, I've always lived independently, in a modest apartment near the Willamette River. I don't like showing off, and I've never wanted anyone to owe me anything. For years I quietly supported my brother, Brandon Whitman, through the hard times, including when his real estate firm was nearly bankrupt, but that was never mentioned. Just like me. Never mentioned at all. The party was hosted at my parents' mansion, Edward and Clara Whitman, in Lake Oswego, a wealthy suburb filled with homes overlooking the lake. When I arrived, my Honda Civic was immediately swallowed up by rows of luxury cars lining the driveway. An Audi Q7, a Tesla, even a brand new olive green Porsche. I wore a simple black silk dress, no label, nothing flashy, but decent enough. In my hand was the silver ribboned gift box. A monogrammed pen for Brandon, the only thing I could think of that didn't feel absurd. A young man stood at the gate, dressed in a black suit, earpiece in one ear, clipboard in hand. Like I had walked into a Hollywood gala. "Good evening. May I have your name?" "Zoe. Zoe Whitman," I replied, slightly adjusting the gift in my arms. He scrolled through the list, his brows furrowed. Whitman. Whitman, here it is. "You're listed as a +1 under the Whitman family block." "+1, I echoed, trying to stay calm. "Yes, there's no individual listing for you. Just marked as a guest accompanying the family." I forced a smile, hiding the hand tightening around my bag strap. "That's fine, you can just handwrite it. I can print a new tag if you'd prefer." "No need, I'm fine." I pinned the tag, labeled guest, onto my chest, right over my heart. It tugged the fabric slightly, as if reminding me I truly was playing a supporting role. Inside the house, everything was blindingly extravagant. Crystal chandeliers bounced light through champagne glasses, scattering glimmers across the walls. A jazz band played "Fly Me to the Moon," like it was a royal wedding. I moved through the elegantly dressed guests, every step echoing a sense of displacement. I followed the seating chart taped near the stairs. Table 14. My name wasn't on it. Just a small +1 next to Whitman family. My seat was tucked beside the kitchen door, behind a thick marble pillar. I couldn't see the stage or the band, only hear laughter from the main area, where my parents Brandon and his wife Chelsea were holding court. I pulled out the chair and sat down, facing a limp, swan-shaped napkin with its head slumped, like it had given up halfway. I had thought, at the very least, my father, Edward, would come greet me. He didn't. He glanced at me once from afar, eyes vacant, then turned back to toast a man in a glittering suit. My mother, Clara, was busy boasting about Brandon's achievements, like he'd just won an Oscar. No one spoke to me. Not a single hello. No one asked why I came alone. I sat there, beneath the lights and music, and felt myself dissolve. As if I had never belonged. As if I had never lived under their roof for the first 18 years of my life. I touched the swan napkin gently. Part of me wanted to cry. Part of me wanted to laugh. And a small part, just a sliver, wanted to get up and never come back. That's when the lights dimmed, and my name rang out through the mic, yanking me out of my thoughts like a slap of cold water. "Please welcome Zoe Whitman, beloved sister of Brandon, to share a few words." I froze. I stepped onto the stage like a shadow, not because of shyness, but because I had no idea what role I was being forced into. The spotlight hit my face, making me squint. Below, the faces of the so-called family blurred behind glasses of red wine and disinterested. No one handed me a mic. No one told me why I was up there. The music stopped, and the silence tightened like a wire about to snap. "Zoe, sweetheart." My mother Clara emerged from the side of the stage, cocktail in hand, smiling, like this was her Golden Globes moment. She put an arm around me gently, but I felt her fingernails pressing into my shoulder. Like a signal. "Isn't tonight beautiful? Brandon and Chelsea deserve the very best." I nodded slightly, eyes drifting to my brother seated at the head table. Gripping his wine glass, avoiding my gaze. Clara turned to the crowd, her voice rising like she was headlining Broadway. "And, because Zoe is always so thoughtful, she has prepared a special wedding gift for the couple." I turned to her, chest turning cold. "What are you talking about?" She laughed like I had made a hilarious joke. "The condo in the Pearl District, of course, 2 bedrooms, balcony facing the park. What could be more perfect for newlyweds?" "No," I said quietly, off mic. "Absolutely not. My father, cleared his throat, and spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Zoe, this is a special occasion. You don't need that place all to yourself, right? You travel constantly. Brandon needs a stable home for his family." Whispers erupted like a brush fire. "She's keeping it for herself? She has always been so selfish." I felt every eye pierce me like pins. Judging. Expecting. Maybe even disgusted. Clara chuckled, waving a hand to calm the crowd. "She's just shy. But this would be a beautiful symbol of unity, wouldn't it, Zoe?" I swallowed hard. Milked my nose. "No one told me." Edward stood, eyes darkening. "You're embarrassing us in front of everyone. Or maybe you're pressuring me into something I never agreed to," I said into the mic, each word sharp. The room fell into a weighty silence. Chelsea looked down. Brandon didn't move. No one came to my defense. "Zoe, don't overreact." Clara's voice was soft but her eyes were ice. "It's just a small gesture." I shuddered. Not from the cold, but because I finally saw their true nature. Not as people who misunderstood me, but as people who never once believed I had the right to choose. I turned back to the microphone. "I do not agree." The words rang out clearly, steady and firm. The room froze. Then came the rustling, a few awkward coughs, and murmurs spreading like a storm. Clara stepped forward, still smiling, but her hand gripped my arm. "You're making everyone uncomfortable." I pulled her hand away. "If someone feels uncomfortable because I won't give away my own home, then I have nothing to say to them." Edward shouted. "All pretense gone. You owe us so much. Your mother sacrificed her entire life raising you, and this is how you repay us?" I stared straight at him, my heart pounding. "I paid off every loan Brandon ever took. I covered the house repairs last year. I paid your hospital bills 2 years ago without asking for anything back. I owe no one anything." The air was thick, like gas, waiting for a spark. I took a deep breath. Not to calm myself, but to keep from breaking down. Not because of them, but because of myself. The fool who thought today would be a celebration. I removed the name tag from my chest and held it up for everyone to see. If this is what family means, then I'd rather not be part of it. And I stepped down, leaving the stage behind with its suffocating silence. I walked past the tables, past Brandon, who still hadn't looked up, past Chelsea, who stared at me like I had done something vile. I walked straight out of the banquet hall, out of that house, and I knew. I had just walked away from the toxic cycle they called family. In the hallway leading to the parking lot, I heard footsteps rushing behind me, but I didn't turn back. Because I had had enough. I hadn't even made it out of the lobby when I heard a glass slam onto a table, followed by the sharp clack of dress shoes against marble. Before I could turn around, a crushing force slammed into my temple like a hammer. My vision blurred, like lightning had exploded inside my skull. A breath later, I heard glass shatter and a chorus of gasps. "Oh my God, he just hit her." I reached up, my fingers immediately finding warm, thick liquid running down my face and onto my collar. Blood. My father, Edward Whitman, was still gripping the champagne bottle, its neck fractured. He said nothing, just stood there, clutching it like his hand had acted on its own without consent from his mind. His face was flushed, his shoulders trembling with unrestrained rage. My mother, Clara, stood a few feet away, wineglass in hand, her face devoid of emotion. She didn't rush to help. She wasn't shocked. She just said, coldly, "You ruined everything. This is your fault, Zoe." At that moment, I didn't feel pain. Just numbness. As if my body hadn't fully processed what had happened. Around me, whispers grew louder and spread like crashing waves. For a weekend to recover. Call 911 again. Call 911 again. This is supposed to be a birthday party, not a crime scene. I scanned the room, searching for a familiar face, someone sane enough to pull me out of this nightmare. Brandon, my brother, was seated close by, staring into his plate, swirling his wine as if it held the secrets of the universe. Brandon! I called out, my voice hollow. Not from tears, but from freezing despair. He didn't respond. Didn't move. Didn't look up. No one in my family came near. Not a hand on my shoulder. Not a single napkin offered. They just stood and stared, like spectators watching a shocking twist at a wedding. Not horrified enough to act. An older man at table 6 leaned over and murmured to his wife. If that were my daughter, I would have pulled her out of here. His wife replied. But you're not Edward. A single drop of blood fell onto the pristine white tiles. Then another. Each one spreading like red ink. Punctuation marks ending the story I once called family. Only one voice cut through the noise. Jonah, my cousin. The mechanical engineer who always needed help with loan documents. Someone call the cops, he shouted. But didn't lift his phone. He just stood there, staring at me like I was a car crash. I slowly stood up, still holding my head. The wound began to pulse, the pain building in waves, but I refused to collapse. Not here. Not in front of them. All the sounds around me faded into background noise. Just the click of my heels and the sound of my own uneven breathing. A young waiter backed away as I passed, panic in his eyes, unsure whether to help. I didn't blame him. He showed more kindness in that hesitation than the people who had raised me for over 20 years. I walked past Brandon without turning back. If he wanted to keep his eyes glued to his plate forever, I would let him rot in his cowardice. The front doors opened, no one followed, no one called out, no one tried to stop me. As if I had never been there. I called an Uber. The blood had begun to crust along my jaw, sticking to my shirt. The driver glanced at me nervously in the mirror. Do you need a hospital, ma'am? Yeah. At the emergency room, the fluorescent lights made everything feel even emptier. I sat waiting for stitches with a cold glass of water in my trembling hands. Each time a nurse asked for my name and date of birth, I felt like it was some kind of cruel joke. Like I was confirming I existed, when at that party, I had been reduced to a disposable shadow. The nurse looked at me with familiar eyes. Anyone here with you? I shook my head. No, just me. She nodded softly, then said gently, You're not the first. I left the hospital close to midnight, my head wrapped in white bandages, the pain dull but constant. I sat in the car, watching the city flicker and pulse. But none of it felt like mine anymore. When I got to my apartment, the door was intact, the lock untouched. But my heart? That would never be the same. I stepped inside, closed the door and cried. No sobbing. No sound. Just tears no one would ever hear. Because bruises fade? But the moment they chose to hurt me in front of the world, that was the end. I woke up on Monday morning with my head heavy as stone. The scent of medical gauze still lingering in the air, mixed with disinfectant that hadn't quite faded from the collar I had hurriedly washed the day before. I thought I would sleep deeply after everything that had happened. After the blood-soaked party. After the unexpected blow from the man who called himself my father. But no. I just lay there, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling, as if closing them would unleash every image that had haunted me. I made myself a cup of ginger tea, my hand still trembling as I held the mug. When I turned on my phone, the screen lit up with a missed call from an unknown number, and a voicemail. I hit play, and the world tilted off its axis once again. Hi, this is Karen from Cascade Realty, just calling to confirm today's showing at 2 o'clock for the Pearl Street condo listed under Ms. Whitman. If you have any special requests, feel free to let us know, or use the lockbox as indicated. I froze. Pearl Street. The condo I currently live in. I had never contacted anyone to list it for sale, let alone authorized a showing. I called back immediately. Hello, Karen. This is Zoe Whitman, the owner of that condo. I never scheduled any showings. There was a pause, followed by the sound of papers rustling. Oh, that's strange. According to our system, the listing is under your name, but it also lists a cosigner, Edward Whitman. Is he a relative? My heart clenched. He's my father, I replied, each word heavy as granite. And I never authorized him to do anything. How did they get access to the key? Karen hesitated. It says, the key was in a lockbox, attached to the door, with the code entered from the same phone that created the listing. We're very sorry if this is a misunderstanding. Would you like to cancel the appointment? Not just cancel. I want to know who submitted the listing and uploaded the documents. My attorney will be in touch. I ended the call, feeling like a bucket of ice water had just been thrown in my face. I rushed to the bedroom and tore through my handbag, the same one I had brought to Brandon's birthday. I remembered clearly, after dinner last week, my father had said, "Let me carry that for you, it looks heavy." I didn't think twice. I handed it over, assuming it was one rare moment of kindness. Looking back now, he had the perfect opportunity to search my bag and take the spare key I always kept in the small inside pocket. Sweat pooled in my palms, nausea rose in my throat, like my body was reacting to betrayal even faster than my mind. I opened my laptop and pulled up the property records. Everything was still in my name. No signs of a transfer. But something was happening. And my parents were doing it behind my back. One calculated step at a time. I dialed Marvin, a lawyer I had met at a recent networking event. He was a friend of my boss, specializing in internal family property disputes. I never thought I'd need someone like Marvin, but now, I had no choice. Zoe? I remember you. What's going on? My family is trying to sell my condo behind my back. They have a key. They created a fake listing, and I think they're planning a legal takeover. He was silent for a moment, then spoke, like flipping a switch. Send me everything you have, the original deed, receipts, proof of unauthorized use. We'll start this afternoon. I emailed him everything in under 10 minutes. While waiting for a reply, I called a locksmith. A middle-aged man arrived by noon, beanie on his head, tool case in hand. This lock's been used recently, he said, inspecting the scratches around the knob. Someone's been going in and out, trying not to get noticed. I want it all changed, and add a fingerprint lock too. Got it. It'll take a few hours, but I'll have it done today. I leaned against the hallway wall, watching him work. No break-in, no forced entry, just casual, familiar access. Like they walked into my home the way one might stroll through a store, picking whatever they pleased, assuming no one would stop them. That afternoon, I received a message from Clara. Zoe, we need to talk. About the family. About the future. Don't be so quick to judge before knowing the full story. 5 o'clock. The old house. Just your parents. Don't worry. No apology. No explanation. Just an invitation to a new performance. I stared at the message for a long time. Then set the phone down. I knew what awaited me there. Not reconciliation. Just another sweetly wrapped punch, this time served with hot tea and a warm hand towel. But I would go. Not out of hope, but because this time I needed to face it. And I would not go alone. I would bring the truth with me. I got the message from my mother on a quiet April afternoon. Portland was draped in a gentle mist, and everything around me had finally started to feel still. But that message sliced through my peace like a razor. Zoe, give the family a chance to clear things up. No one wants this misunderstanding to last forever. 4 o'clock. The old house. Just your parents. No drama, no outsiders. I promise. I stared at the word promise, like it still meant something, but the part of me that once believed in it had died the moment that champagne bottle shattered. I didn't respond immediately. I thought it over. Then I decided. I would go. Not for hope, but for instinct. Part of me wanted to look them in the eye. And more importantly, I needed to know what they would try next. The house in Lake Oswego looked like something out of a magazine. Freshly trimmed lawn, tulip beds in full bloom, the door freshly painted. But what hit me wasn't the appearance. It was the air inside. Too polished. Too perfect. Suffocatingly fake. My mother opened the door before I even knocked. She wore a pale blue knit dress. Hair softly curled. Makeup light. Like, this was tea with an old friend. Not the aftermath of betrayal. "Zoe, you came." "Yes," I replied evenly. "Just the two of you, right?" "Yes. No one else." I stepped inside. Everything felt staged. Like a set built just for me. Butter cookies on porcelain plates. Fresh licorice tea. Napkins folded into maple leaves. Even a framed photo of me and Brandon as kids. One I knew had been missing from the house for years. "You still remember this chair, don't you?" Mom pointed to the armchair near the fireplace. "Where you used to open your Christmas presents in 4th grade. "Just say what you need to say," I cut in, no patience left. My father emerged from the hallway holding a thin folder. His eyes weren't angry like at the party, but they were cold. Calculated. "Zoe, there's been a lot of misunderstanding. We don't want this tension anymore," he said, placing the folder on the tea table. I didn't sit. I just stared at the gray cover. "What is that?" "A way to make everything clear," my mother chimed in sweetly. "We need boundaries, an agreement, so no one feels threatened or misunderstood." I opened the folder. Under the light, the bold title hit me like a punch. Property Transfer Agreement. Pearl District. I turned to the next page. Every paragraph written in carefully neutral legal language. Internal arrangement. Peaceful resolution. Clarification among family members. But it all meant one thing. They wanted to take the only home I owned. "Are you too serious?" I asked, still holding the open folder. My father sat down, crossed his legs, and didn't take his eyes off me. "You don't need that condo, you're always traveling. Brandon and Chelsea need space to get ready for the baby. I'm the only one on the deed. No one has the right to pressure me." "No one's pressuring you," my mother said gently, like she was soothing an angry child. "It's just a gesture for the sake of family. A symbol of healing. You can say no, but you know what path this will take if you keep resisting, don't you?" I looked at them. They weren't my parents anymore. Just two adults sitting across from me. Using lawyer-like tactics to corner a witness. Manipulating memories like emotional poker chips. I closed the folder and set it down on the cookie tray. Everything here is staged like a model home, but I didn't come to sign anything. I came to see just how far you'd go. My mother froze. My father blinked, his face stiff as stone. I stepped back, still staring at them. "That night you let me walk out of a party with blood on my collar, not a single apology, and today, you hand me paperwork disguised as reconciliation?" "Zoe?" My mother called softly. "Don't," I cut her off. "I used to think silence was grace. Now I know, it's how manipulators win." I took out my phone, snapped a photo of the folder, and slid the phone back into my pocket. "Thanks for the tea. I'll be sending this scan to Marvin. And next time, if you want to talk to me, be honest. Drop the performance." I turned and walked away, my heels tapping a cold rhythm against the wooden floor. No one followed, no one called after me. The wooden door closed behind me like the final period at the end of every last illusion I once clung to. And this time, I knew for sure. I wouldn't be coming back. I met with Marvin the next morning, clutching a thick folder and carrying the weight of 2 sleepless eyes. The dull ache from my head injury still throbbed at the base of my neck, but I was used to that pain being ignored. He brought me into a private meeting room. Soft amber lighting and a fresh cup of coffee on the table made me feel safe for the first time since that horrific night. Marvin flipped through each document copy with the sharp focus of someone who had seen far too many betrayals in his career. You fully own the Pearl District condo, no co-owner, no secondary mortgage, no recent notarized authorization, he said firmly. I nodded. I never signed over anything to my parents. They only got the spare key from my purse and found a way to impersonate me. Marvin tapped the edge of the table, thinking for a few. Are you aware you're still the legal owner of another property? The house in Lake Oswego where your parents live? I looked up sharply. My heart clenched. What? Records from 2012. That home was under foreclosure risk. At the time, you purchased it in a foreclosure rescue. You paid the remaining mortgage balance and have legally held the title ever since. They never filed for a transfer. I was speechless. I remembered that time. My mother had called me in tears, saying if they couldn't make the final payment, they'd lose the house that had held 3 generations. I had just landed my first full-time role at the investment firm, barely a year in, but I agreed to drain my savings to help. I didn't count how many papers I signed. I didn't care about whose name was on the deed. I just thought, family needs this. And now? I'd bought them a roof over their heads. They repaid me by striking me at a party and trying to sell the place I call home. Marvin gently slid the file back to me. If you'd like, we can issue a notice to vacate today. They have no legal grounds to remain there without your permission. I sat in silence for a long time. I didn't picture my parents. I pictured myself. 25 years old, wearing a frayed collar blouse, standing in a bank, trembling as I signed page after page, thinking I was doing the right thing. I looked at Marvin, and for the first time since this began, I said it without shaking. Send it. I want them out. He nodded, no further questions. That afternoon, I didn't go to the office. I went home, pulled the curtains, flipped my phone face down, and sat quietly by the window. The emotions didn't pour out like a flood. They seeped in like cold water. Slow, steady, bone deep. 3 days later, the eviction notice was delivered to Edward and Clara's hands by Marvin's office, witnessed by officers from Clackamas County. I wasn't there. But I knew. Because just 1 hour later, Brandon, the brother who hadn't said a word since I was assaulted, sent footage from their home security camera to the family group chat. In the grainy video, my father opened the door in a wrinkled robe, toast in hand. My mother stood behind him, pale, still holding a teacup. The officer handed them an envelope. She read a few lines, then turned and shouted something at him, her mouth tight, eyes burning. I watched the clip twice, not to enjoy it, but to remember. To remember that when they treated me like a stranger, they never expected I would fight back. That night, I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't play music. I boiled water, poured chamomile tea, and sat in the wooden chair by the table. The same chair I used to offer my mother during her rare visits, if she ever really visited. I thought about how they called me ungrateful, how they painted me as the villain in their version of events. But what I thought about most was how long I had let them do it. Not this time. I opened my laptop, logged into Dropbox, and created a folder called Truth If You Care. I began uploading everything. Bank transfers I sent Brandon 5 years ago, scanned property deeds, emails from my mother asking for help with hospital bills. Even a message from Brandon's wife, telling me not to ruin everything. No captions, no hashtags, no excuses. Just evidence. I sent the link to the extended family chat. The same people who once asked, "How could you be so disrespectful?" The same ones who shared doctored videos of me screaming about money. Then, I turned off my phone. By the time morning sunlight poured through the windows, my condo was still. No waiting. No hoping someone would message, "Sorry I stayed silent." And I knew I was starting the part of life that no longer included them. But this time, I was in the driver's seat. I knew something was wrong when I turned on my phone the next morning and saw over 60 unread messages. Most were from people I hadn't spoken to in years: old college friends, former coworkers, distant relatives. The first message hit me like a punch to the chest. "Zoe, what happened? Did you really say that at Brendan's birthday party?" I opened my social media app and saw it. A video posted by Clara Whitman. My own mother. Title: When Gratitude is No Longer a Family Value. The clip was under a minute. They had edited it to show only one thing: me, on stage, saying, "I do not agree." But they had cut everything that came before. The part where I was pressured to publicly gift my condo to Brandon and Chelsea. No one heard my father saying I should feel honored to give it up. No one heard my mother's cold chuckle when she suggested I give it, as a symbol of family unity. All anyone saw was a woman standing on stage, emotionless, saying "I do not agree," while a few people clapped awkwardly in the background. Below the clip were hundreds of comments. "Archie works in finance, must be rich enough to lose her humanity. Parents did everything for her, and this is how she acts? Chelsea's pregnant, and she won't even give up one condo?" Not one person mentioned the blood I left on the marble floor. No one brought up the shattered champagne bottle. No one saw me stumbling out of the party with a bandaged head. They had written a story. A fake tragedy. Where I was the villain, and they were the victims. I sat there, seething, not with rage but with a cold, piercing clarity. If they wanted to play this game in public, fine, I'd bring the light. I opened my Dropbox folder, the one named Truth If You Care. I reviewed every file to make sure the evidence was clear. I added 3 audio clips, one of them a voicemail from my mother last August. "Zoe, sweetheart, your dad and I are short on money to fix the porch. If you can, could you send $4,000 in advance? We'll pay it back." I included bank statements showing the transfer labeled Whitman Residence Emergency Fund. I uploaded the 2012 home purchase contract, the deed in my name, my signature. I even added screenshots of late-night messages from Brandon begging for help when his company was drowning in debt, and the money I sent, never once asking for it back. Finally, I uploaded a photo of the bruise still visible on my temple, the blood-stained dress from that night, and the hospital report confirming trauma from blunt force impact to the head. Then I wrote a simple post on my barely used personal account. Title: Not everyone who shares your name deserves to be called family. I wasn't planning to speak out. I didn't want to air private matters online. But when you are physically assaulted, slandered, and falsely portrayed to destroy your character, you no longer owe silence. This is the full story. This is the proof. No narration, no edits, no performance. But listen, the truth. Truth if you care. Dropbox folder. I didn't reopen the app after posting. I didn't care who believed me. I only cared that anyone seeking the truth could find it. 3 hours later, a message from Amina, my best friend, appeared on my screen. I read everything. They should be ashamed. You did the right thing. Next came a text from my cousin Meryl in Seattle. Your parents sent that video to the family group chat. But now everyone's sharing your folder instead. Trust me, that clip's done for. A few of the same relatives who had mocked me in that chat sent private apologies. None of them dared to say anything publicly. I didn't reply. I didn't need apologies born from embarrassment. I wanted justice. Something my family never gave me. That night, I played jazz, lit a candle in the kitchen, and for the first time in years had dinner alone without feeling lonely. I watched the candlelight shimmer across the oak table as I flipped through pages of an old notebook. Ones where I had once planned Brandon's financial rescue. Where I drafted ways to help Chelsea return to school. Everything I'd done for them wasn't erased. They had just discarded it. But the truth can't be thrown away. And now it was out there, burning with a light they couldn't put out. 3 days after the eviction notice, I returned to the Lake Oswego house. This time, not as the humiliated daughter forced to flee, but as the legal owner, reclaiming a home I had once given away, unconditionally. A moving truck was already parked out front. Workers in navy uniforms carried boxes from the garage like they'd done it 1,000 times. They didn't ask who I was, they just nodded and kept moving. No words were needed. The paperwork had already spoken. Edward and Clara had moved out the day before, according to Marvin's report. No one knew where they went. And I didn't care. They might call this betrayal. I called it consequence. I stepped across the threshold, unlocking the front door with the same key I'd held for 11 years. The one I used to come home during the holidays, to take care of Mom after surgery, to ask Dad for advice on my first investment deal. Now I unlocked it, like opening the door to a dead house. No photos on the walls. No cinnamon morning candles burning. Just stale air, drained of memory. I walked into the kitchen, the heart of every family celebration. The place I once baked pumpkin pies every Thanksgiving, even though no one touched them. On the table sat a beige envelope. Just my name, Zoe. No greeting. No apology. A show signature. Just one line. Printed in cold Arial font. This house was never yours. I didn't laugh. I didn't hurt anymore. I folded the paper in half, slipped it into my coat pocket, and turned toward the stairs. Opening the small wooden cupboard beneath the staircase, the one my mother used for old tablecloths, I found a dusty shoebox with no label. I opened it. Inside was a photo of me at 8 years old, missing teeth, lopsided braids, proudly holding up a small District Science Award trophy for my homemade volcano model. Alone. No parents, no Brandon, no one beside me. It had never appeared in any of the albums my mother proudly displayed. Beneath the photo was a swan-shaped napkin, slightly wrinkled, its edge still stained with dried red wine. It was the same one, the napkin I had quietly folded during Brandon's party, sitting alone at the table by the kitchen, unacknowledged, labeled as a +1. I didn't know why they kept it. Maybe someone stuffed it into a pocket without thinking. Maybe my mother meant to throw it away and forgot, but it was still here. And it was mine. I closed the box, held it to my chest for a few seconds, then left the house. I didn't lock the door behind me, not out of carelessness, but because there was nothing left inside worth keeping. By the time I got back to my Pearl District condo, dusk had settled. The last light of March smeared across the window like watered-down paint on a mirror. I placed the box on the dining table, poured a glass of red wine, and set the swan napkin in the center. It wasn't crisp like the day I folded it. The fabric had softened, the creases dulled. But it was still a swan. Head high, silent and unbroken. Just like me. I didn't need to rebuild a family, I only needed to rebuild myself. Not the version that begged for acceptance. Not the quiet older sister. Not the daughter who did her duty. I reorganized my bookshelf, tossed out every frame that held their faces. I bought a new set of glasses, not needing anyone to toast with. I called a plumber to finally fix the leaking faucet that I had ignored for months. I moved the sofa to face the river so I could watch it every morning. No one asked what I needed. And I didn't need anyone's permission to be at peace. That evening, Amina knocked on the door. She brought a basket of fruit, a small jar of lavender, and a smile free of judgment. She didn't ask if I was okay. She simply placed a hand on my shoulder and said, "You're stronger than all of them combined." We had dinner together. Simple pasta, 2 glasses of wine, and a soft jazz tune playing from a small speaker. She talked about work, summer travel plans, a novel she was reading. I listened. I smiled, and for the first time in a long while I didn't feel like I was bleeding inside. Before she left, Amina pointed to the swan napkin on the table. "Keep that one. It's part of your history, but now, you'll fold something new for your future." I nodded. When the door closed behind her, I sat down, picked up the swan napkin, and for the first time, thought about folding it into a crane. A creature that doesn't swim with the flock, but flies above the water. I didn't need forgiveness. I just needed not to return. My story wasn't just about a condo or a champagne bottle to the head. It was a journey of awakening from the toxic chains disguised as family. I had been erased from memory, exploited, beaten down. But from that I rose, reclaimed the truth, my dignity, and the right to peace. I learned that sometimes, peace doesn't come from forgiveness. It comes from having the courage to leave. And silence when chosen is the loudest voice of all. What do you think about Zoe's choice? Was she right to stand up for her worth against her own family? Share your thoughts below and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful family stories.